I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, December 14, 2020, and the time is 7:00 p.m. Due to the health pandemic and the extension of Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-10 COVID-19 peacetime emergency, this meeting is being conducted via video conference in accordance with Minnesota State Statute 13D.021. In addition, Dr. Hillman, Superintendent of Northfield Public Schools, is present in the board's regular meeting location at the Northfield High School Media Center in order for Northfield School District taxpayers to ask in-person questions or make comments during the Truth in Taxation public hearing as part of tonight's agenda. The district did make accommodations for questions or comments regarding truth in taxation or general public comments by submitting them via email by 5 o'clock today. This meeting is open to the public via live stream. The recording of this meeting will also be posted on the district website. Procedurally, we will conduct the meeting as follows. We'll begin by taking board members' attendance by roll call. Anita Ozzie will call the name of each board member in alphabetical order by last name. When your name is called, please respond by saying present. Anita?
Broniak,
Present.
Gerwitz,
Present.
Hardy,
Present.
Iverson,
Present.
Pritchard,
Present.
Quinnell,
Present.
Stratmon,
Present.
Excellent, thank you. Also present at this video conference meeting are Anita Ozzie, Dr. Hillman's administrative assistant, Aaron Bailey, Director of Community Education, Val Mertisdorf, Director of Finance, Greg Gelino, Principal, Northfield Middle School, and Craig Poppenhagen, Principal with Clifton Larson Allen. Board members are asked to mute their microphone when they're not speaking. At the start of each discussion, as chair, I will call on each board member in alphabetical order by last name for any questions or comments. If you don't wish to speak, you are welcome to pass. I will conduct one round of questioning for board members. You can consider using the raise hand feature throughout the meeting. All votes on the items for individual action will be conducted by roll call by Anita Ozzie. Each board member should wait until their name is called before voting. So with that, we will move ahead. Dr. Hillman, there were a few personnel items and some property tax levy information in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, you had in addition to the truth and taxation presentation packet, which included an Eller's analysis of the property tax levy and tax impact. We had several generous gifts as part of the table file. We had a couple of appointments. We had a leave of absence and a grievance appeal. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. If there's no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Moved by
Second.
Jeff. Second by Amy. We will conduct a roll call vote for approval of the agenda. Anita?
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The agenda is approved. We'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, property and business owners, parents, employees, and students of the Northfield Public School District to address the board. This is a listening opportunity for the board and not a time to debate an issue. To accommodate the public comment portion of our meeting, we have made available on the district's website the ability for the public to submit feedback to the board via email by 5 o'clock today. All submissions that follow the district policy regarding public comment will be read now by myself. And just please note, public comment for the Truth in Taxation public hearing will take place during that part of tonight's agenda. This comment period is reserved for Northfield Public School District taxpayers only. So I will move on to read public comments, general public comments. We have 5 of them this evening. The first is from Jane Jeffrey, Northfield citizen. I urge the Northfield School Board to redesign the school mascot. It is racist and violent image. It doesn't fit the times we are living in with the renewed focus on inclusion and appropriate images. Again, thank you, Jane Jeffrey, Northfield citizen. The second is from Mara and Sam Steinberg. To the Northfield School Board, we are writing in support of a change to the Northfield Raider mascot. With Northfield alums in our family, we have been proud Raiders for many years. However, the mascot image always made us uncomfortable. Now we truly know the harm that this imagery causes. Having a mascot that is human is offensive. It objectifies an individual, a culture, or both. Please move forward in making Northfield Raiders inclusive to all by making a mascot that we can be proud of. Our third public comment is from Jane Becker Nelson. Dear school board members, I write to offer a comment on agenda item 7.3, the review of the Northfield High School Raider mascot. As a graduate of Northfield High School and parent of 2 children who will one day attend Northfield High School, I support the removal of this culturally and racially insensitive symbol. As a youngster, the Raiders mascot was in the background at all football field, ice arena, band room, and on flyers. I never questioned it, nor did I ask myself, how does this depiction impact my Asian identifying classmates? Why is my team's mascot carrying a sword and glorifying violence? It's time for all of us to ask these questions. Symbols are silent, but speak loudly. I urge you to follow the commendable action of many other schools and professional teams. Remove the harmful mascot and develop a new visual symbol for Northfield High Schoolers to unite around. Every step matters to ensure that all students have access to an excellent education, and a positive learning environment that affirms their identities. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this important issue. Okay. Next, we have a comment from board member-elect Corey Butler. To the board, as a school board member-elect, some feel it's prudent for me to share my opinion on the motion in front of the board tonight, giving formal approval to the high school administration to consider a new Raider mascot. I'm supportive of the current board approving the motion, and I look forward to joining the conversation in January when I am sworn in. Our last comment is from board member-elect Claudia Gonzalez George. Dear school board, thank you board members for meeting tonight and giving your time and energy to our district and our community. Many thanks to every teacher, EA, staff administrator, and other school personnel for all the hard work they put into every single day of this challenging year. Parents and students are trying our hardest every day too. May we have many more good days than do-overs. As Northfield Public School Board member-elect, I would like to voice my support to update the Raider mascot as requested by the Student Council of Northfield High School in February of this year and presented to the board by Dr. Hillman on November 23rd, 2020. Earlier this year, the Student Council at the high school put forward a solid effort to update their school mascot, picking up the baton that previous classes had put forward. I was extremely proud that Student Council members shared on our local radio station, KYMN, reasonable arguments for giving new life to the 1956 mascot, even while recounting painful interactions with athletes from other schools. With true school spirit and deep pride for Northfield High, many students, staff, faculty, and community members, including myself as a parent of a current high school and alumnus of class of 2020, look forward to a modern version of the Raider mascot. I think archiving the current mascot and phasing in a new design is brilliant and good stewardship. I trust administration at Northfield High to bring the board 4 options so we have an updated mascot design in place by the end of this school year. Okay, that concludes our public comment for this evening. We can move on now to our first discussion, which is a truth in taxation presentation for the payable 2021 property tax levy. And after the presentation, that will be followed by public comment. Dr. Hillman at that time will explain the technology that we have in place for anyone who wanted to make an in-person or a comment versus via teleconference. Also, as a reminder, there was some information that was provided in our table file this evening as part of Val's presentation. So, Val,
Julie,
take it away.
Julie, just as I did have one announcement on the
Oh,
announcement.
I'm sorry.
No
Not
problem at
following
all.
my script.
So we just have the one announcement this evening, and we want to congratulate Northfield High School student Maggie Malika. She is our Northfield High School 2021 Minnesota State High School League Excel Award winner. And the Excel Award stands for Excellence in Community Education and Leadership. And it's a unique recognition program designed exclusively for Minnesota high school juniors who are active in school activities, who are leaders in their schools, and who demonstrate a strong commitment to community service. This is one of my favorite awards that I see given every year because it's about people who are involved in activities, but who go beyond that. And I want to give a heartfelt congratulations to Maggie Malika, who is the Northfield High School 2021 Minnesota State High School League Excel Award winner. And that is the only announcement that I have this evening, Julie.
Excellent. Congrats to Maggie Malika. And I apologize again for
Wish you.
yes. Okay. So now we can move on to the truth and taxation presentation. And again, a reminder, there was some information in your table file. So Val?
Good evening. So I'm going to go through quite a bit of financial information tonight. We're going to talk about truth and taxation and our levy certification that is for approval tonight. We are going to revise the general fund budget and talk about an updated financial forecast. So I will get started. So as a reminder, just how the levy cycle works. So annually, the assessor's office goes through and assesses all the property values in the spring. And then, it's showing black on my screen, Matt, is that?
Yep, I'll take care of it here in just a second. You
Okay.
can keep talking and I'll get it on the screen here.
All right, no problem. So they assess all of the values in the Northfield School District. And basically, Minnesota has a pretty complex property tax system. Comparatively, there are over 40 different classes of property and different rates that can be assigned to them. So each property gets a net tax capacity, and all of the property within the Northfield Public Schools boundary gets added up into our total tax base, basically. So each taxing jurisdiction, the county goes through this process. And for reference, we are actually situated in 3 counties. So we work with Rice County, Dakota County, and Goodhue County for the entire process. You can go to the next slide. So in September, I presented the preliminary certification. And once that is certified, we send a copy of that to the Minnesota Department of Education, as well as the 3 counties. And they take that dollar amount that was certified. So we certify at the max, which means all of the calculations and formulas that the Department of Education has in statute, that the legislature has in statute, are calced to a certain total based on our enrollment estimates and some various other data that we input to that system. So that number gets calculated as a for our tax base, and then the statements are mailed out in November, which most of you probably received, and you will see all of your taxing jurisdictions on that statement. Between September and now, we have the opportunity to make sure that all the calculations are correct. If we were to have a bond or a voter approved referendum, it gives opportunity for that to be added. But pretty much whatever happens in September, we can not go above that number unless it's voter approved. I'm excited tonight to tell you that it's actually a little bit less than what we presented in September. And that is primarily due to the bond refunding that we just did. So that was an exciting, good story for a decrease. You can go to the next slide, Matt. So legislative impact, as you know, the state constitution has two priorities. A uniform system of schools is one of them, and therefore our funding is highly regulated by the state. we get 70% of our budget from the state. This levy provides about 24% of our total general fund budget. But the state sets all of the formulas, all of the tax policies, the class rates, all of those things, how much we can ask for a voter approved referendum. All of those pieces are driven at the state level. You can go to the next slide. There are also quite a few things that can impact the actual dollar amount that you see on your property tax statement from year to year. Obviously, a voter approved referendum and changes in enrollment, a significant portion of the revenue formulas are enrollment based. So any fluctuations, both positive and negative, result in swings in those revenue calculations. The levy is also a 5-year process, start to finish. So we are certifying this levy tonight. That's actually revenue for us next school year, for the 21-22 school year. And there are adjustments for up to 3 years after that. So we estimate enrollment. When the enrollment is finalized, the state goes through a process to make sure that we got all of the money that we were owed, or they take it away if we got too much. And so that can happen for up to 3 years after we've received the revenue. Also, legislative changes. You might recall last year, there was a legislative change to move the $300 board approved levy option into the, with the 424 local optional. So that's now 724. So swinging those amounts out of voter approved into other. So those kinds of things impacted as well. And certainly the change in your market value, or if your property changed class, if it was classified differently, can impact it greatly as well. And then certainly levies by other taxing jurisdictions. So typically you'll see the city and the county and the school district, as well as some other small special ones depending on where you live. So all of those things play into it. You can go ahead. So as I said, this provides about 24% of our general fund budget. It also is all of the revenue to pay for our debt service payments. It includes both voter approved levies as well as state authorized. And it really does fill in the gaps for the chronic underfunding that we see from the state, and allows us to continue our great programming. Go ahead. So the 2021 property tax levy for the district overall is up about $327,000, or about 1.64%. The preliminary levy was $20,436,000 for 6054. And the final certified is $20,313,043.39. So a slight decrease, and again, that decrease is primarily related to the bond refunding that we did. Our debt service payments came down a little bit, which, as a reminder, is complete savings for taxpayers, which is a great thing. I'll go to the next one. So this is just a comparison of last year's authority, both the preliminary and the final versus this year's. So you can see overall, the levy certification is up about $327,000 from what we certified last year, and down about $123,000 from what we preliminarily certified in September. Go ahead. So this is a breakout of where the different funds come from. So of the $20 million, about 37% of that is just the voter approved referendum. So you can see it's a very significant portion of the levy, and very much because of the wonderfully supportive community that we live in. The debt service is, sorry. The debt service is about 26%. Again, the majority of the debt service is also voter approved. General fund other of 31%, you can see the note on the bottom. That's all of the other kind of state authorized formulas, such as the local optional revenue, operating capital, the long-term facilities maintenance, and some other programs. The capital of 4% is the voter approved $750,000. And then community services has about 2% of that total. Go ahead. So we are required to show taxpayers some specific breakout. And so you can see here how it breaks out by fund. So general fund is about 14.5 million. Community education is about 419,000, and the debt service is about $5.3 million. So for a total of 20.3 million. And you can see on the right-hand side, it's about 2.8% increase in the general fund, a 0.56% increase for community ed, and then a 1.32% decrease for debt service, which is primarily related to that bond refunding. The voter approved category, not quite, sorry, is 12.6 million, and the other is 7.6. So you can see the majority, I think it was about 63% or so, is voter approved. And again, we live in an extremely generous community. And other is the other state authorized levies that we have access to. And that decline in the voter approved of 1.55% on the right is partially related to our projected decrease in enrollment. So the referendum is coming down slightly because of that, but it is also because of the bond refunding. Those are voter approved bonds that were refunded. And so that amount decreased what was actually levied for. So that's part of that as well. And then the bottom classification is just referendum market value and net tax capacity. And that's really just the ways in which the county calculate how to spread the amount of our referendum or the other tax levies. Go ahead. So this breaks out in a little bit more detail, the general fund, and specifically because that's our operating fund. So you can see by the different revenue sources where all of that funding is coming from. The referendum is obviously the largest portion of that at about 7.6 million. And then local optional revenue and the long-term facility maintenance are the other two large ones. That gives you a breakdown. Towards the bottom, you can see there's abatements and adjustments. And again, our goal is always to have those adjustments as minimal as possible. We don't want to see large swings. Estimating enrollment close to accurate is helpful in maintaining those swings. So we're not jumping all over the board, because providing consistency for taxpayers is important, so they're not seeing large swings from year to year. And then community ed and debt service for that total. Go ahead. And this is just kind of the history of our levy, just for comparative purposes. So 20.3 million is about a 1.64% increase. And you can see the history of where we've been. The pay 18 was the year that we had the increase to the voter approved referendum. So that's why the 23.62% is there. And I think the average over 5 years is about 5.85%. Go ahead. All right, so that was a lot of information about the levy. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the general fund budget. As a reminder, as part of the truth in taxation process, we are required to talk about the budget. And so we use the opportunity, since we're already discussing the budget, to talk about where we landed, and then to revise that because we have quite a bit more information than we had in the spring. You can go to the next slide. So there are quite a few things that we information-wise have now that we did not have in the spring. We have lots of estimates. So our audit is complete, which you'll hear about next. Our October 1st enrollment, which is a pretty significant driver for several formulas, is complete. all of our employment agreements have been finalized. We've got new staff hired, and so we know where they're placed on the salary grids and things like that. This year is obviously a little unique with the pandemic, and so we did receive coronavirus relief funds, so we're including that in the revised budget. And just overall different COVID protocol expenses to make sure that we're in compliance with the safe learning plan from MDE. And in addition, the portage program, which is a requirement of that plan. And so pulling all of those things together to make sure, because we didn't have an estimate for those in the spring when we did our adopted budget. Go ahead. So this is our enrollment projection. As we've already talked about, we did see a pretty significant decline from what we estimated. And so you can see the 2021 adopted, we had projected about 4.4 or 4,406.8 weighted pupil units. So as a reminder, K through 6 is weighted at 1.0 and 7-12 is weighted at 1.2. And so the 3988 is a little more close to actual physical student count. There's some differences in there, but that's a pretty close estimation. And then the weighted calculation is what our actual revenue is calculated on. So as you can see, the revised estimate is about 43 pupil units less. Again, we use a enrollment model that calculates about 17 different ways. We use the traditional cohort survival. So we assume that if you were in kindergarten, you're going to first grade, etc. And then based on some historical enrollment and trends, it projects out. So we are actually about 67 students with the October 1, less than what we had projected, but based on our history, I don't believe that the weighted calculation will be down 67, if that makes sense. So it's still a decline. It's still less than what we had anticipated. And so that certainly impacts the budget, but you can see also up above, I included last year's. So you can see in 1920, we had a similar scenario where we had projected 4,460 and we revised it down because we had lesser students, and the actual kind of came in the middle. So hopefully that will be similar, where we'll end a little bit higher than what we're projecting with the revised budget, but obviously there are some significant unknowns this year, both in terms of enrollment and just for families, and making sure that they're choosing the best option for their students. So about half of the enrollment decline was actually just kindergarten. So when you look at the numbers, you can see the secondary is still increasing, which actually helps to slow the impact on our revenue because they're higher, they have a higher weighting. So we do get a little bit of additional relief for that. But the decline is basically 100% in the elementary level. So we're certainly hopeful that the kindergarten's a 1 year and they'll be back next year. So that's the current estimate. So the revenue revision has obviously a lot of moving pieces. I always think it's interesting to summarize it into 5 lines because the actual detail behind this is pretty significant. But the property tax, as you know, does not change. So we certified that last December. So that's a known amount and absolutely the easiest part of my budget because it's already done. The state sources is declining slightly. And again, that is directly related to the enrollment decrease. And then you can see a pretty significant jump for federal sources. So we got just over $1 million of coronavirus relief funds. And so that is accommodating that addition to our budget. And then local sources you'll see is declining. Lots of moving pieces in here. We have direct control of about 2.7% of our actual budget. the property taxes, the state sources, and the federal are all formula driven, either by the state or federal government. So we can plug in the numbers based on our enrollment or other factors, but the local sources is really the only one that we have any kind of control, and that's actually a strong word. A lot of it's donations or participation fees, things like that, where we can increase the fees, but that might result in decreased participation, for example. This particular decrease is mostly related to activities and some of the building permit stuff. So we aren't renting any of our buildings right now. And so that's obviously a decrease in our projected revenue. And with the state of activities currently, we are expecting not only less participation, but we also don't have as much admission revenue because we have to restrict the number of people that can actually watch the games if they're able to have them. So definitely some concerns there, bringing that number down. Hopefully, again, that will bounce back. And also last year, the 1920 audited results, just as a point of reference, is higher because of the sale of the iPads and the lease purchase for the property. So there's about $900,000 that was in the actual audited results also. So that you can see kind of last spring already had an impact on that revenue source. So just as a point. So 58,184,370 is the revised budget, which is just slightly higher than the adopted budget. And again, that's primarily related to that coronavirus relief funds that we received. Go ahead. So the expenditure revision is always kind of an interesting thing to work through. This includes obviously $1 million of the coronavirus relief expenditures. So there's some addition in here, but there's also a bunch of things that are coming out. We are expecting some savings with our transportation, for example, because there's no activity transportation or field trips or things like that. So there's some substitute savings and utility savings. So there's lots of things that are kind of added for COVID, face masks and staffing for portage and things like that are kind of throughout this revised budget, but there are also things that we're anticipating some savings on. So it's sort of, it's a bunch of positive and negatives. And so it's hard to capture all of that. The other major thing contributing to the decrease is the capital and equipment line. You'll see that's $2.2 million or 2.3 if you're rounding. And that's directly related, or mostly directly related, to the $733,000 that I brought to the last board meeting for the long-term facility maintenance. So we had authorized about 1.8 million to supplement our construction projects. And so about 733,000 of that happened prior to June 30th. And so we changed, basically pulled them out of the budget because it already happened, and matched up that with our prior year LTFM plan, if that makes sense. I believe that was the biggest points there. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is the summary when you pull everything together, and you will see that we were originally planning to end the 2021 school year with about 15.31% unassigned fund balance. Now, as we talked about, I believe at the last meeting, we ended significantly better than anticipated in 1920. And so we are starting the 2021 better than anticipated. So that beginning fund balance line, you can see it goes from 16.4 to just over 18 million. So that's a great place to be. Starting off strong during a pandemic is a good place to be. It allows us to be proactive in our response and planning and making sure that we're supporting students and staff and families in the best ways possible. So with the 58.2 million roughly and the 60 million of expenditures, the new projected unassigned fund balance is about 11.2 million or 18.69%, which, as you know, the board goal is about 16% unassigned fund balance. So we are now projecting that we will end this school year above the 16% goal, again, directly related to ending last year better, which we'll talk a little bit about with the audit. Most of the impacts from last year were directly related to the spending freeze that we implemented when we were required to shut down in March. We didn't have any discretionary spending from March through June unless it was directly related to distance learning or a regular operating bill. And so that made some significant impact on the budget, as well as substitutes and utilities and transportation and all of those things, contracted services, a lot of different pieces that just weren't happening because we weren't in school in person. You can go to the next slide, I believe. So due to the timing of everything that we've talked about, we felt it was really important to do the updated financial forecast now. That is typically something that we have done in January. But since we have been talking about and anticipating a budget reduction process this year, I wanted to make sure that we provided this update because we ended better. We're starting in a stronger place this year. And obviously we're in a pandemic, which is a different, not what we anticipated at all. So the financial forecast has obviously a lot of assumptions. So I like to just start that out. Pretty much any financial forecast model that I can run will look 5 years out like we are falling off a cliff and don't know what we're doing. That is very common. And so I only will show 3 years out, partially because we are on a 2-year state budget cycle. And so we currently don't know what's going to happen in the spring for the next 2 years. So going out any further than 3, I think, is just problematic. Enrollment trends can change in all of those pieces. So right now I have 0% on the basic per pupil funding for both fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. And then I believe I have 0.5% for fiscal 24. I would say it's very unlikely that we would have 0 3 years in a row. That would be pretty catastrophic, I think, for school districts. But I'd much rather be conservative and show worst case scenario and then be able to respond more positively if the legislature chooses something else. Due to the free lunch and breakfast program right now, we are projecting about a $500,000 loss in compensatory revenue. Right now, that is only for fiscal year 22. That revenue calculation is based on concentration of free and reduced approvals. And so we've just obviously had less families fill it out because there's not a need for it right now. And so that is currently the projection. That does also have the potential to impact our Title I funding, but we won't know that for a while yet. It's kind of on the edge right there. I do have a small increase in special education. There is a built-in increase in statute, which I believe is about 4%. However, I do have some concerns about their maintenance of effort requirements this year. Last spring, we were allowed to basically reassign staff, special ed staff, to support the emergency childcare and some other duties that were required. That is not the case. We can reassign special ed staff this year to support the tier 1 care, but we have to track the hours and the dollars in which they are reassigned, and they will not count towards our maintenance of effort is our current understanding. And so that's a significant issue because we have multiple special ed educational assistants supporting our tier 1 care during the day. So the maintenance of effort as a reminder for those is basically a requirement of the district to spend at least 1 penny more on special education than we did the year before. There are 4 reasons that we cannot meet maintenance of effort, but they are very, very specific and particular. If we have a very high cost student move out, that would be one explanation, but we would actually have to document the cost that that student incurred to show that that is not a cost in our budget anymore. So things like that. I believe Director of Special Services and Cheryl Hall and I are hoping to come in January and do a presentation about maintenance of effort, just to give you some more information and just a little more insight into our concerns about this particular one. So I did a small increase just because if you don't meet maintenance of effort, there are some ramifications to your next year's budget. So I chose to be conservative on that one. I know I'm a little into the weeds on this topic, so I will stop, but just know that we're hoping to come and provide some more information about that. Federal revenue, we are projecting that to stay flat. Again, there may be an impact to Title I, but at this time we haven't heard about any other impacts for our federal funding. It does include fairly limited salary increases. Obviously, we know we're in a position with a deficit budget, and so we need to be aware of that and responsible as much as possible with how we're managing that. So that is included in there. Even if we were to do complete zeros, most of our contracts have things that, like the teaching contract, for example, has lanes and steps that automatically allow people to move through them. So even with a zero, there's still a small percent increase in the overall cost of that contract. Health insurance, I know Director of Human Resources, Molly Biesman, presented at one of the last meetings about our self-insured health insurance. We have been seeing some pretty significant increases in our claims, and so we are anticipating some pretty significant increases. The premiums for 2021 are increasing 5%, but that will be completely on the employee's contribution. There will be no increase to the district contribution based on the way the contract language reads right now. So I am anticipating for fiscal 22 for that to be requested in negotiations. And I did a 5% increase the year after that, just because I'm not, I want to make sure that we have enough forecasted to cover any increase. I also was not sure if we would just see increased rates from the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare providers, if they are going to be increasing rates just to make up some money in their budgets as well. So couple different moving pieces with that one, and then just a 2% inflationary cost on all of the miscellaneous supplies and materials throughout the budget. The capital project levy, just as a reminder, is $750,000, and that does expire in 2023, which means it's revenue for the 23-24 school year. So just a point there. You can go to the next slide. So this is a summary of the numbers. So the first column is the revised budget that I just talked about, and then a 3-year forecast. So you can see the on the very bottom of this slide, they have the APUs, which is our weighted pupil unit calculation for enrollment. We are still projecting declining enrollment for the next several years, and very much in line with the demographic study that we had done about 7 years ago now. And so overall, You can see that we are this current budget, the spending variance is blue there. We are still projecting a deficit budget of about 1.9 million. So even though we ended last year more positively than anticipated, we are still projecting a deficit budget even with the additional coronavirus relief funds. And then that obviously projects forward and continues to get larger as inflation and all of the factors in that calculation go through. You can go to the next slide. So this is the fund balance. Basically the same thing. So the current revised budget, the 18.69 that I presented just a little bit ago. And you can see that for 2022, we're projecting about 14.21% for unassigned fund balance, which is obviously below the board goal of 16. The number on the very bottom is the amount that would need to be either reduced from expenditures or added to revenue to meet 16% on the penny. And so you can see that number just exacerbates as the items compound across the schedule. So that's a lot of information. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget reduction process. So you all had access to my narrative. My professional recommendation is that we consider postponing the budget reduction process 1 year. We certainly know that this is not something that we aren't going to have enough enrollment to push it off multiple years like we have in the past. This is something we will have to deal with to be responsible stewards. But I think there are several benefits that I see to waiting 1 year. We will have the state budget for the next biennium by May, and that is 70% of our budget is from the state. So having those known amounts makes a pretty significant difference. And hopefully it'll be a little more positive. I know the last state forecast was more positive than originally anticipated, but that is a pretty big unknown for our budget overall. We will also just have better information about the pandemic in general, how it's affected our students and families, how long will we be in distance learning or hybrid, and those kinds of things, because all of those impact our revenue and expenditures in various ways. And we'll hopefully know a little more about next year and if we're returning hopefully to some sort of more normalcy, if that makes sense. I also think that it would allow for a much more robust in-person process to gain community understanding and support. We are prepared to do the process via Zoom. It will not be, you just don't have the same ability to do it on Zoom, to have hundreds of people participate in the way that we would like to, and the way we have in the past. So that is just a point for consideration. I think it's important to have robust community participation. And so that would allow for expansion of that, because we're going to assume that we won't be social distancing forever. We would also hopefully know if we're getting any other stabilization funds from the state or federal government. And so I was checking my notes because I had a couple points that I wanted to make sure. I think the other major piece for Dr. Hillman and I, as we've discussed it, is providing a sense of normalcy, as normal as you can be, or at least a sense of relief for our staff and our students and our families who have anticipated this coming. We know that the pandemic has been tough for everyone. And if we have the ability to take one thing off people's plates, I think that that's important. have a hard time saying that with 18.69% unassigned fund balance that we should consider going through a process and potentially impacting positions and people and their health insurance and all of those things that come with a budget reduction process. So I feel like if we can support our students and staff in this time, that's an important place and consideration for us. So that is a lot of information. I try not to make my presentations this long because I get that it's a lot. But I hope that you know that we take the stewardship very seriously, and there are a lot of moving pieces this year. The pandemic has created a lot of unknowns and interesting circumstances, and we are trying our best to manage the funds in a way that the community would be proud of. There was, just for the truth in taxation, there was a tax impact statement in the table file. I did have Ellers update that with our 1.36% instead of the 2.25%. And across the board, if you look at that, the average is a decrease for taxpayers of about 4%. So sorry, I'm bringing that right at the end, but that's a positive. So I think we're going to do the public comment portion first, and then we can open it up for board members. Is that correct?
Yes, Val, that is correct. So I will ask Dr. Hillman if there is anyone present in the media center.
I am here alone. There is
You
no
are
one
here. There is no one present. Is there anyone that has taken advantage of the opportunity to make questions or ask questions or comment on the truth in taxation as a Northfield Public Schools district taxpayer?
So there is no one here in person, Julie, but what we will do now is because we are required to provide during a public hearing like this, the opportunity for people to have public comment. If you are interested in making a public comment and you are on Zoom via this particular presentation, what I'd like you to do is you are able to put something in the chat only that the panelists are able to see. So if you have an interest in making a public comment, please put your name and your address in the chat. Once you submit that, I will explain that you're going to be put into the video. I will promote you to be what is called a panelist in Zoom. You'd be able to make your public comment, and then I'll have you go back into it as an attendee. So if there are items here that people would, if there's anyone who is on the call who would like to provide public comment, please at this time put your name and your address in the chat. We will then call on you, promote you to be a video panelist. You'll be able to make your comment during this public hearing live, and then we would go ahead and put you back in as an attendee. So I'm going to call for that 3 times. And if we have no one who's put that in at that point, I do have one question that's been put in the chat, but it's not been requested as a public comment. So the person who put that in there, we can certainly get that question to you. But if you want to make a public comment, please put your name and your address, and then we'll promote you to a panelist. Okay, very good. So we have a comment from Corey Butler, and I'm going to take Corey and make him a panelist now. And Corey, then you'll be able to make your public comment here. Okay, so Corey, you should be here with us as a panelist now. And if you want to start your video, Corey, and then you may ask your question.
So if prior to speaking, if you could state your name, we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and just remind you that questions are appropriate, but debate of issues is not. So welcome, Corey, and we ask for your question or comment.
Thank you. Good evening, board and Dr. Hillman and the rest of the staff there. Quick question concerning the potential variance for future years. My question is the second and third year an additional reduction, or is that a sum total? So I think it was 2.4. I don't have it in front of me now, but 2.4 in the first year, then maybe additional 1.9 in the second year. Is that a sum total then for that 4.5 or 3.5, or is it an additional amount? Thank you.
Val, go ahead and answer that question.
Okay, so the 2.4, the spending variance in 2022 is basically just the revenue versus expenditures. So our expenditures are $2.5 million higher than our revenue. And so on that next slide, if I can get there, it talks about, so that's just actually revenue over expenditures. The number on the very bottom of the next slide is the actual correction needed to make the unassigned fund balance reach 16%. So there's kind of two different variables that we're looking at. So for 2022, to get to 16%, we would just need to cut $1 million. That would mean we would have 16%, but we would still have a deficit budget, if that makes sense. So the unassigned fund balance, sorry, this is a lengthy explanation, is basically whatever's left that's not restricted by the state. So we do have some changes with our long-term facility maintenance revenue, where that's an increasing amount. So that's the reason we can have a deficit budget, but still meet the 16%, if that makes sense. So I think hopefully that answers your question. But it is cumulative on that slide. So the 2.5 million is then 3.2 the next year. It's a deficit budget year over year. You wouldn't necessarily have to add those numbers together on top of each other.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Corey. I'm going to ask first, I see no other names and addresses in our public comment at this point. In the chat, I'm going to ask a second or a third time here. If there's anyone else who would like to make a public comment about truth and taxation, please put your name and address in the chat box, and I'll promote you to be a panelist to make your public comment and or ask your question. Chair Pritchard, I have asked the attendees, the 9 attendees twice, and I have placed a request in writing in the chat. Seeing no additional people coming forward, I'd recommend that we move forward with the meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So this will now be an opportunity for board members to ask any questions or comments regarding both the general fund budget revision, which as a reminder, we will vote on as an item for individual action tonight to approve, and the truth and taxation for pay 2021 levy. So I will again go through the roll call for board members. If you have no questions or comments, you can pass. Tom.
Thanks, Val. That was a lot of information. And you, as always, do an excellent job. And I agree we should wait a year to do the budget reduction process. There are a lot of things can change. Question, so we've saved money already on like utilities or other expenses, and that was for like spring, and have you, I mean, and now we're theoretically saving money again because we're into distance learning, and has that been factored into the budgets going forward, or is that, I mean, just unknown and not really included yet?
Yep. So we are anticipating some savings because of the distance learning now, but it is different than it was in the spring. The spring was a complete shutdown, so our buildings were locked. We were able to shut most of the lights off, with the exception of the building that we had the tier 1 emergency care at. It was, you know, sort of like we just weren't there. And so that's a different level of energy savings. Our buildings are open now. Even though we don't have students present, there are staff that can choose to work from their classroom or from their office. So it is a little bit different. We're certainly not going to see the same level of savings that we saw in the spring. On the flip side, we've had a very mild winter, which is helping with our utilities because we're not running as much heat yet. So there's lots of variables, but I'm not anticipating it to be nearly as significant as it was in the spring, but certainly have a small decrease expected for this year.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. Amy.
First, Val, thank you for taking such a complicated budget and pulling it all together and making it understandable in your explanation and in your documents. I found it very clear. So thank you for that. I also really appreciate the document in the table file, the tax levy rates. And I think
Yeah.
we need to say that one more time, that people who have, whose housing values haven't gone up substantially will have a decrease in school property taxes. And I think that's important news for a lot of people. So could you just repeat that one more time in better English than I did, just so everyone can hear that? And that's my final comment.
Absolutely. So basically for somebody with about a $200,000 home, which is the typical example that we use, I believe it was about 4.4%. I don't have it right here in front of me, but so if your market value stayed exactly the same, which is very unlikely, but if it did, mathematically, your school district property taxes would decrease 4.4%. Or another way to view that is if your market value increased 4.4% approximately, you would pay the exact same amount that you had paid the prior year for your school district taxes.
Thank
So.
you. I hope everybody hears that and understands that that's really due to a lot of your good work and Matt's and the administrations to find ways of saving money on the different, bond payments and refunding the bonds. So thank you for all of that. And I think it's all good news. And I also agree that your idea to wait a year before making any big decisions is a smart one, because a lot's going to happen in this next year.
Thank you.
Rob.
Thanks, Val. That was a great, and as everyone said, very full presentation. I'm sorry, I'm not completely prepared with the details, but and looking at my tax statement, there were I think two, maybe three different categories of school district taxes. And I noticed on mine, one of them was an increase and one of them was a decrease. So can you explain why one category might increase and the other one decrease?
I can. So usually on your taxes, the two categories that you would see are voter approved and other. That's typically what they will print on the actual statement. So on the slide, what's the slide number? Slide 10 of my presentation. If you want to go back and reference it, you don't have to, I will tell you, but there, the middle section of that has the subtotals by truth and taxation category as voter approved and other. And so the voter approved went down 1.55 and the other went up 7.38. So in theory, that should correlate to what you see on your taxes. The voter approved should have gone down slightly and the other would have gone up. The voter approved is going down two primary reasons. The enrollment decrease that we're anticipating. Obviously, the referendum is a large piece of that voter approved calculation, and then the bond referendum. So those were voter approved bonds. So that decrease in the payments we owe means that we're levying less for the taxpayers. So those are the two primary reasons that number's decreasing. And then the other is all the other formulas combined. And there's lots of different reasons that those are going up for various calculations. But that's why you see that on your taxes. It's that particular breakout that reflects on your actual tax statement.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
My other question was on the big pie chart of where the percentages, and you say 26% is debt service fund. I think you said does all of the debt service come from local sources?
Yes, yep. So
So
we are required, sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering if there are any other parts of the budget that come entirely out of local sources, or if everything else is a kind of combination of state, federal, and local?
Pretty much all the other budgets are a combination. Debt service is specifically, there's a statute that requires us to levy 105% of our debt service payments. And that's really a way to support school districts in there, because we don't have the ability to just levy taxpayers, for instance, the way the city can or the county can. They have different statutes that allow them to build a building or do things like that. So most of our things we have to get voter approval. And so, so 100% basically of the debt service. There are some very few and far between exceptions that would not require voter approval for the debt service. Usually they result in a reduction of general fund revenue. But that is a statute driven calculation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Yep.
Ellen, questions or comments?
I had two comments. One, I wanted to thank Val just not only for this report, but for the amount of effort that you no doubt have had to put into thinking through. I'm thinking about the budget revisions and how you had to strategize with the COVID funding and what it could be used and what were the rules for it when the spending had to happen, and all of that happened, and the stewardship that you and leadership have put into this to put us in a place where my second comment is I also agree with Amy about and Tom and your recommendation about postponing the budget reduction process and how we're able to do that because of this stewardship and because of the way that you've been able to look at the funding to put us in a place where we could postpone this because of having gone through this before, the level of engagement that you would want. It just would be much more difficult to have over Zoom. So I really appreciate all of your effort and thank you for a thorough report.
Thank you.
Jeff, questions or comments?
Yeah, thanks for the report. Appreciate that, very much detailed. And I would also mention that I think it is wise, as you said, to see what the state comes up, if that's our 70% money, to wait and see what the reasonable new normal will end up looking like when we have more numbers and factors in. So thank you for your report and your diligence in all you do.
My pleasure.
No, questions or comments?
I think you're muted, Noel.
Am I still muted?
We
No,
can hear you
you're good- You're
now.
good now.
Go ahead, Noel.
Val, thank you for your leadership on behalf of both the district and for the voters. Your knowledge is very, very clear to us. And regarding the reductions, I would agree to postpone them a year as you recommended.
Thanks, Noel.
All right, thank you. Again, Val, I echo the comments from the board members. Just a phenomenal job that you do. You do every day for us. And I really consider your thank you for the great thought that you have put around the next steps in our budget process. I think two really strong points that I think will be important to make with the community will be that it does allow us the opportunity to update our strategic plan. And I think even as we will hear Greg Jeleno talk about the work at the Northfield Middle School, and we've heard the other building principals, they've learned so much about instruction and being able to inform some of our decisions around what we've come to learn out of COVID-19, but also the opportunity for us to take the time to update our strategic plan, because it has been 5 years since we've done that, and it is a time that we had looked at an opportunity this past year to do, and we just didn't have that opportunity. And then the other piece that I think is really important, and when you are a testament to this every single day, is that it isn't an all or nothing, that there will be opportunities recognized and fully maximized in terms of the way we can do strategies now. So it isn't really an all or nothing. It's really just, I think, giving a longer runway to the work that we know we will need to do. So thank you so much. This is not the last, it is kind of a bit of the Val show tonight for Val. So lots and lots of presentation time for you. So we really appreciate it. And we just know, we hope you know how grateful we are to you for all your amazing work. So with that, I will introduce Craig Poppenhagen, who is a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, and he will be presenting the results of the 2019-20 fiscal year audit. Welcome, Craig.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And Val, I'm happy to continue your special night here this evening. So we'll talk about the audit results here. The opinion on the financial statements is a clean report. So basically, with auditing the numbers, it means, you know, the numbers look correct to us to the best of our ability in all material respects. We found all of the support behind those numbers that we tested for and looked for. So good result. Again, that's not different than previous years. So you like to have audits go well like this and have clean results. Along with looking at the numbers, we look at the controls or the processes around the numbers. We have no findings for internal controls, not even for financial reporting or preparation of the audit documents. So that is also a very good result. Very few of our clients get by with no findings there. So that's you know, a real testament to your team, Val as well, and her background and diligence in tracking the numbers for you. So that's a good result. Compliance wise, we did audit federal program dollars again. The first program that we looked at was Child Nutrition Cluster, and no findings there. The second program, kind of dovetailing into coronavirus relief aid, you did have some in the 1920 year. So specifically the ESSER program. And with the ESSER program, you had about $260,000 of expenditures claimed. Here's where we have a little bit of a roadblock. The compliance supplement that we, or I, as your auditor, needs to audit the ESSER program or feel comfortable that we've tested the compliance appropriately, has not been issued yet in final form. So I can tell you we did test the expenditures that were claimed. They look appropriate, but unfortunately I can't release a report on the federal compliance piece of the audit until that compliance supplement is released. That being said, I do suspect our path forward will be to just pull the federal compliance audit section out and issue that separately at a different point in time. So once that compliance supplement becomes available, we can issue the federal compliance piece of the audit. We can continue releasing the financial statement piece. So those numbers, the financial numbers, need to be into the state by the end of this month, and I think that's going to be our path forward to do that, is just to break those two components apart. Next, or last piece of audit compliance I'll talk about is the Minnesota legal compliance. So that is some specific statutory compliance for the state that we have to test, and no findings there as well. So very, very good results overall. I'm not aware of any findings out there, even in the federal piece. The next slide, 2020, you know, it wasn't enough that we had COVID kind of piling on to all the challenges for the 1920 year, but we also had an accounting standard change as well. And that was GASB statement number 84 around fiduciary activities. So what GASB statement 84 did is it triggered a restatement of fund balance in the general fund because it changed the geography of where student activity funds and scholarship funds are presented. So for 1920 and going forward, student activity funds and scholarship funds as they stand are reported as part of the general fund. Prior to 2020, that was not true. So fund balance wise, it added about $500,000 to restricted fund balance in the general fund. For fiduciary kind of standalone activities, you have a custodial fund that continues. Things to watch for going forward, any type of new arrangements around fiscal hosting or being a fiscal agent, any trust agreements that might come up, those can come, you know, perhaps as part of bequests or wills and testaments, things of that nature, any new custodial agreements. So anything like that, we'll have to look through and evaluate through the lens of GASB Statement 84. Fiscal 21 and 22 brings with it a new lease accounting standard. So some, you know, new changes to look forward to down the road as well from a financial reporting standpoint. The next slide, I won't drill into this one too hard. This is just kind of a slice and dice of the general fund, showing the revenues, the expenses. So kind of that in total, 57.5 million in revenues coming in, 56 million in expenditures going out, added about $1 million to fund balance. You know, cost containment initiatives, all of those things that were discussed in the truth and taxation piece. So I won't reiterate those. The operating capital piece, I'll touch on that. That's in the middle of the slide. You did spend some of those operating capital dollars down. So equipment and lease payments are running through there for like your one-to-one initiative, curriculum and technology. You also had a land purchase for the shop. So you drew some of that money down. Kind of since LTFM or long-term facilities maintenance is available in the very next column, basically, kind of your goal for operating capital is around 200,000 ending fund balance as kind of a carry forward. So those are kind of some of the adaptations you've made with LTFM kind of being its own capital funding mechanism. The non-spendable assigned, unassigned column on the far left, that includes now your student activity funds and the scholarship ending fund balance. So again, that was about $500,000, say, for due to that accounting change. Okay. Next slide is just kind of a pie chart for general fund revenues. Where did the funding come from? About 70% state, about 24% property taxes. So that's consistent with truth and taxation. 2.5% federal, and then other, the 3% includes student activity revenues mainly. So that's something kind of new geography-wise going into that little slice. Trend's pretty consistent with the previous year, which is the next slide. Just kind of a, you know, just a visual checkpoint. Is the mix different than it was the year prior? No, it's the mix is substantially similar. So the next slide I have for you is general fund expenditures. So just kind of looking at the general fund expenditures, kind of where are we spending our dollar? And the pie chart on the left here is all general fund spending. The pie chart on the right is just a breakout or a subset of the instruction related components of your spending. So kind of big picture wise, the smaller pie chart on the right represents about 80% of your general fund dollars going into either into the classroom directly or to supporting students. So 80 cents on the dollar in the general fund is going into students, student support or into the classrooms directly. And that's up about 2% from the year before. So the next slide is the 2019, kind of how did it stack up and compare. About 78, 79% going into student instruction for 2019. Enrollment trends, these numbers again kind of dovetail into what you've seen in the previous segment for truth and taxation, and have been holding pretty consistent, trending upward kind of in the middle year, down a little bit, and then as you're projecting a little bit down, about 44 students going into the 2021 school year. So the significance, of course, is when 70% of your funding is really state formula driven. Each student represents about $6,500 now in general education state aid. So it's kind of quick math, kind of quick statistics there for you. The next slide, just kind of looking at the food service fund balance. And with the COVID environment in the fourth quarter, food service was kind of, the whole operation was kind of stood on its head. Basically with the shutdown, your meal counts, meals served decreased, of course, pretty significantly, the number of meals. And that's just for the simple fact that there's not students in the building to partake in the food service program. You had budgeted to spend down about $235,000 of fund balance here. The actual spend down was pretty close to that, about 220. And what I would say, with the COVID and the shutdown, the fact that you're able to come out that close to plan with such an upheaval in the food service operation, that's just very good management, very good stewardship there, and adapting quickly to kind of weather the storm. I would say, your food service staff, they earn their dollar keeping track of that. Community service is the last slide that I have to talk about. Kind of the same upheaval, very similar at least as with food service. Community education, that one, top line revenues were impacted, of course, because of so many activities that are in person can't be in person or couldn't be in person in the fourth quarter. So lots of cancellations of activities, just things not happening on the top end side for revenues. And the other thing impacting community education was basically the governor's mandate or executive order to provide childcare services to essential workers at no cost to them. So from the childcare side in the fourth quarter, while you had the cost of providing the service, you didn't necessarily have the revenue coming in to fund it because of that initiative. So that certainly had a downward pressure on fund balance as well. So here, You had budgeted a spend down of 110,000, came in a little bit more than that at about 130. But again, I would say, excellent job managing to that result with such an upheaval in operations because of the COVID environment. So overall, I think you weathered the storm in 19 and 20, and are doing a good job just continuing to manage through that. I think in 20 and 21. So that's what I have for prepared remarks for you, Madam Chair. I'll turn the meeting back to you, and you can direct me where we want to go from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. And we certainly appreciate you acknowledging the work of Val, and just to preemptively congratulate Val, as I know other board members will want to do, on this amazing audit, as she has always been able to do for us. But in talking to Luke Greedens, who did the actual audit, he just was so incredibly complimentary of Val and the work that she does, the meticulous way that she works, and just what a pleasure it is for them to work with the Northfield School District. So with that, I do want to ask board members if they have specific questions for Craig. If you don't have any, you're welcome to pass. Tom.
As everybody will say, great job, Val. There one question. So on the federal compliance, it's COVID related, but yet you're saying that you don't have the standards or whatever to know whether we're in compliance. But if there aren't any standards, how can we know if what we're doing is compliant? Or if you see what I'm trying to say.
We have, yeah, I would say what I can say is we have a pretty educated guess, if you will, on what the compliance requirements will be, but until they're actually in print for the masses, for everyone to see, that's the holdup there.
Thanks.
So Tom, just my 2 cents on that, because I cannot stop myself. So the federal government provided us money, and then they tell us what we can do with it, but they have not told the auditors how to check that we did those things. So they can say, based on what the federal government gave us guidelines for the funding, that we were in compliance, but until the federal government gets their act together and actually provides the documentation that they said was supposed to be available a month ago, we won't have the official for that. So it results in us having to actually issue 2 separate audit reports, which is kind of ridiculous. So that's my 2 cents.
Can I ask a question then about that, Craig or Val, with the state statute having that needed to be completed by December 31st? If that comes through in the next couple weeks, will that require a special board meeting to just approve the audited ESSER funds, or is that something that we would have grace into 2021? Has MDE told us how to do that yet?
So I talked to MDE, and their response was basically the 12/31 deadline is in statute, and there's no waivers or anything. We would just not be in compliance, but there's no actual consequence of not submitting it. And then they followed that up and said, except you wouldn't be eligible for the school finance award. And I said, oh, it's kind of a consequence in my opinion. So we are going to issue just the financial statements and submit that. And so then we will be technically in compliance with the statute. They just won't have the full report, but we will have submitted the bulk of the audit basically by the 12/31 deadline. So we would still be eligible for the school finance award. And then my understanding is we can just submit the single audit whenever we have that available, after they issue the compliance supplement. So I'm not anticipating a need for a special meeting. I'm comfortable just submitting the financial statements to be in compliance with that statute.
Okay. And of course, a special board meeting would assume that they got that together in a very short amount of time, and Craig and your team would have a chance to do that. So with the clock ticking, I think your plan is good.
Yeah, it would be, you have the holiday season coming in there too. So pretty soon, everybody's running at about 50%.
Right.
maybe
And I
for
just
about a
don't
week.
think, yeah, I don't think it's fair to ask anyone at this juncture to try to jump through hoops for something that has been so delayed. So Val, if you're comfortable with that approach and that it does not preclude us from school finance awards, which are always so well deserved, I think that's a sound plan. Amy, questions or comments?
Yes, I have a comment. First, thank you, Craig, for the presentation. I always enjoy hearing about the audits every year because it's always such great news, and it certainly is the foundation of my confidence in Val and the administrative team at the district. And so thank you for that. And I just would like to add to not only are these reports turning out so well, and Val is doing such an amazing job with them, that she had a baby in the middle of it too. And it didn't stop her, didn't slow her down. So thank you, Val, again, for all your excellent work this last year.
Great comment. Thanks, Amy. In fact, I always tease Val that she should name one of her kids Gatsby, but she passed on that. Okay, so Rob.
I have no questions, just joining everyone else and thanking both Craig and Val for their hard work on this. Thank you.
Ellen.
No questions, and I just acknowledge having this audit is fantastic, and that we get used to having these fantastic audits, but they're, we shouldn't take them for granted. So thank you, Val, and your team. And then thank you, Craig, for the report and shining a light on Stephanie Stromey's work with the food service, because that was certainly, under unseen circumstances. So thank you for highlighting that.
Very true.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Jeff.
Yeah, Craig, thank you for the report. Val, for all your updated information, and sounds great. Appreciate it.
Noel, questions or comments?
Thanks for the report, and congratulations to Val for, again, doing a great financial job for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And of course, we have to thank Craig from Clifton Larson Allen and Luke Greedon, who did the audit for us. You are always been such amazing partners for the school district. And we don't normally highlight two funds, but I appreciate that your recognition of the phenomenal work of the community education and the food service, and that we had, or child nutrition, excuse me, that we had the opportunity, as Ellen said, to shine a light on those two particular funds for the school year. So thank you, Craig, for your work, and we will move forward with approving the audit as required by the state. So thank you, and all the best to you in the new year, Craig.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks, Val. You get a little bit of a break now. Okay, so we'll move on now to the middle school update. We welcome Greg Gelano to provide the middle school update. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. Val, you're on a roll. You just want to do mine, and I'll just sit back.
Sorry, you got to be behind me. Just the way the show goes today.
That's okay. I'm a numbers person. You know how much I like data and numbers, so that's just fine. I actually liked it. So thank you for giving me a chance to do an update at the middle school. And I will kind of clip along and hit some highlights here, some things that are going well so far. I know we're in distance learning, but our hybrid really was a success. We put really a big focus on health and safety. We made that our top priority going into the school year, and I can say it was successful. The protocols that we put in place, if you just look at our district dashboard, we had a minimal number of cases at the middle school, and we had 0 that were actually any type of close contact that ended up being a spread of any type at the middle school. As a matter of fact, about close to half of the cases we actually had at the middle school actually came from students that were participating actually at the high school. So we actually had a lower number of just middle school activities in and out of the building. So kudos to the team of all the adults that put in time and effort to make it happen, but it was successful. The other piece is the hybrid model itself. We took a look and did a really outside the box type of thinking with hybrid. And we really focused in on that core instruction. I want to reiterate, I've said on many platforms that the model we landed on, even though it involves our electives teaching remotely all year, or at least till we can all come back in person, that does not mean we don't value the electives. The electives are hugely valued at the middle school. But it was difficult times. You have to make some tough decisions. And with feedback that we heard from parents wanting more instruction time and needing the really as part of the protocol, it's kind of connected so we could keep kids together in pods and move them. The only way to do that was to simplify our schedule, which our parents and our students wanted as well. So the model, I think, was a success. If we have to transition back to that, will continue to be a success. The transition from hybrid to distance learning, I can tell you that it was, I was a little nervous at first because when we did it, I heard next to nothing from parents or students. And I was getting like, okay, is no news good news, or is no news everyone's not happy? And I can tell you that it was no news is good news. I've heard from multiple parents now as through email and phone calls. I even sent a little survey out and asking, and both our parents and our students really liked the changes we made in distance learning, spreading out the content so that students had things to do every single day. It spread out the homework as well. We were very systematic on what classes we flip-flopped and how we spread them out, knowing which classes tend to get more homework. So it's the transition, it was seamless. Even though it was short notice, we were able to give a paper copy to every single student that was in our building. We got to mail one out to families that were absent, or students that were absent to their families, so they had them. So it really went off without a hitch, better than I could ever expect. I can also say I believe that our response to the parent feedback spring. Again, I mentioned it, the simplifying our schedule. We have set Zoom times now for distance learning. So kids and students know exactly when they're supposed to be Zooming. And if they have to be absent and attend another one, that's fine, but we make it really clear. It's just like if you go to a 3rd hour English class, but you were scheduled for 2nd hour, you're gonna be marked absent 2nd hour. You can probably go to that class to get the content. And that's really helped. It's helped students become more organized. It's really helped parents to know and stay on top and help their students as well. The consistency in Schoology, shout out to Hope and her team for kind of getting that going. I know that was a large undertaking, but it also has been something very important that our families really have been asking for actually prior to even any of the pandemic stuff. So the things that we put in place have been very, very helpful. We had one pretty decent sized snag, but we've worked through that, and people have said that it's been much better. And my last one on here on this slide is, as part of our middle school goals was to have 75% of our families attend at least 2 of our conferences. I can say our preschool conference, we had 99% of our families participate. And then we had, in a pretty short turnaround, if you think about it, we had our fall conferences, and we had 70% of our families attend those. And that's even with counting the amount of time and half that we had for conferences. So we're pretty excited about that. Challenges. We continue to really work and look for ways to engage students that they're no surprise to us. We knew before we went to distance learning that there's a group of students that were going to get tough to be able to log on to Zooms, to really reply to messaging. And that, there's no other way to put it. That gives me gray hairs at night and causes many people to pull their hair out. But we've assembled even more adults to kind of, we call them kind of chasers, and kind of track down these students and see what's going on and talk to families. I worked with Zach Pruitt in HCI and worked with him to be able to hire a couple more Promise Fellows, which they can't start quite yet. We just hired them, but they'll be starting soon. But everyone's really, we learned from last spring some things that were a little bit more effective, and we got after it right away because we knew who those students more than likely were going to be. So we're doing better than we did in the spring, but again, still not where we want to be, but so we'll continue to work on it. Students' responsibility, getting work done outside of class. I have to say that's really not new. I mean, that's something that's been kind of building over the years. We've kind of seen a trend with our students that they can engage and when they're in the building, but getting them to kind of follow through and complete assignments, it's been creeping up a larger number of students not completing some of that work. You add in the pandemic and distance learning and hybrid, and some of those things kind of get magnified a little bit more. But again, working on it, we've changed some things with how we teach. We've gotten better at teaching and distance learning. We're using our tools way better. Students are becoming more engaged in distance learning, as well as I have to say that an added benefit we didn't see coming was we chose going to distance learning to keep our pods, which was smaller groups, instead of combining the maroon and gold cohort and having classes in the 30s, upper 20s. We kept the small classes of 12 to 15, some 16 and 17. But those smaller class sizes across the board, teachers have said has been phenomenal. It's making it easier to get kids engaged. There's students that normally wouldn't be engaged that would hesitate to reply on Zoom, that are freely offering up answers and willing to stay after with teachers. So we're really seeing some good things happen in distance learning. I do attribute a lot of that to the quick connections that we made in hybrid because of the smaller classes. The last one I have on here is Avid. Avid's still going forward. It just kind of slowed down a little bit. We had big plans for doing staff development, and we're doing some of that. We've had a group of about 21 staff members get some virtual training over this past summer, and they now meet a couple of times a month. They're just starting that up to kind of work on different Avid strategies themselves, and eventually hoping that second semester our plan is to start rolling that out with the rest of the staff and kind of start teaching them. But to be honest, I mean, being totally transparent, it is more difficult via Zoom or virtually to get people excited about Avid, about anything new. It is a little bit of a challenge that way, but we are moving forward. It is a priority, as you can see by the graphic that we kind of started up last year. It's one of the things that we want to focus on moving forward. And with that, I will open it up to questions to all of you.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. So board members, questions or comments? Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Questions about students not completing work. Is that homework outside of class that's not getting done?
It is. So there's kind of two components to that. So we're in hybrid, and a student attends class at their maroon cohort, and they attend on a Monday, Tuesday. Then they have their view class, but it's not a homework-based class on Wednesday. But they have 3 days where they're really not checking in with the content area teachers. They have their electives that they have to go to. It's those times that are really challenging. And I've kind of, we do parent tips on a regular basis. We do tips for students. View teachers kind of connect with students and try getting them organized. But it's really, part of it is a middle school mentality. I know the high school struggles with this a little bit too, but it's just developmentally where our middle schoolers are at, that it makes it difficult. you think about it in hybrid, that's a middle schooler has to go literally 5 days before they see their math or English teacher again. And that's a long time. In distance learning, it is slightly better in the sense that they do have core instruction 4 days a week, because we spread out those classes. We flipped a couple classes to the, I call it non-cohort days. So that actually has improved with the work completion, but it's still a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so as you said, that it's kind of just the middle school development stage. So in previous years, when students were in school full time, you saw similar difficulties with getting homework done. It's just a little bit more amplified.
It's a little bit more amplified. There is, when we were even in person, it was every year I was seeing more and more teachers say this is a challenge for them. This is something they're struggling with and frustrated with. So it's not something, even when we come out of a pandemic, that we can say, hey, it's going to be all better. We're going to have to continue to work, build skills with our students and find ways to take time to do that.
And do you see any difference between like sixth graders who are just coming out of elementary school versus eighth graders who are getting ready for high school?
It's a tough question, only because what's expected in the rigor between sixth grade and then eighth grade is so different. I do know that sixth grade coming in, they do spend a lot of time building those skills because it is so new. That transition, that's a big transition from elementary to middle school. And our 2 sixth grade teams do a phenomenal job kind of bridging that gap when students get there and kind of teaching them and coaching them how to become more students. So I don't know, ultimately I can compare the two, but I would, if you put my feet to the fire, I'd say it's about the same going 6th to 8th grade. It's just at a little bit different level.
Thank you.
Great questions, Tom. Thank you. Amy.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for the
Hello.
presentation. I have 2 questions. I'm still a little confused about how the distance learning is working. Do you still have the small classes then, or are the classes combined back together? So you have, 30-person classes, but it's distance learning since they're meeting 4 days a week.
Yep. So what we did is we had a pretty decent discussion with our teachers on what they preferred, because there was pluses and minuses to doing both. And what we decided was we were going to keep the cohort. So we kept a smaller class. So for example, if you're a Maroon Day 7th grader, you had in hybrid, you had 5 classes in a study hall, which in distance learning gets dropped. So 5 classes. We actually moved their Monday, Tuesday to only have 4. We took the science class and we moved it to the other 2 days to kind of balance out their schedule. So they don't have like their math class 4 days a week or their English class 4 days a week. They're only having them 2 days a week. But instead of like in hybrid, just having elective classes on their non-cohort day, they now have in 7th and 8th grade, they now also have a science class, because science class tends to have a little more homework, a little more studying component to it, reading and stuff. In 6th grade, we did the similar thing, but 6th grade, we actually moved 2 classes. We moved social studies because it's pretty reading intense, as well as the science. So we moved both of those over, and that balanced again their workload out as well, and gave students a more structured week if you look at it as a whole, versus having a heavier 2 days and a really light 3 days.
Okay.
So
And
the
then
classes, yes, are smaller. The classes are smaller because of that.
Okay, that sounds really smart. So I'm glad it worked out. My other question I have is, when you were in hybrid mode, did you see any increase or decrease in behavioral issues in the students? What was your sense about that?
Huge decrease. It was kind of like crickets. It was super nice. If you think of the size of the middle school and you cut the number of people that students roaming the hallways, it's amazing how few and how quiet the building becomes. People going class to class. And then again, those small cohorts, those small pods, kind of had a social network that they kind of connected with, and they liked kind of going class to class with. That was kind of their friendship group. That was some of their social time they got to have, because they're with those same groups of kids as they move from place to place. I can say if we combine both maroon and gold cohort, there is actually, let's see, 5, 10, about 40 different pods total. And there's only really one pod that if we come back in hybrid, we may consider moving some kids around, because it's maybe not the best mix, but all the rest are rock solid. We really see very few behavior issues whatsoever.
I'm curious to see where that'll take you for next year when you're planning your classes, and if you'll have learned anything from this year as to how to reduce behavioral issues even further by how you combine students. So,
Yep, I can tell you that there's the interesting piece that a few teachers in 7th and 8th grade have mentioned that they would like to revisit maybe doing some type of teaming and creating teams in 7th and 8th grade like we have in 6th grade because of this.
thank you again.
You're welcome.
Rob, questions or comments?
Well, I was going to ask, I think Amy sort of got it in at the end there. I was going to ask about just, you've been forced to make all these adjustments this year, and if there were things just looking ahead that you learned that you're like, oh, this actually is something we could use all the time. It's not pandemic specific, but that it's an actual improvement upon, the way things were done in the past. Because back in the before times last year, we were talking about trying to do a later start for secondary, and we were like, how is the schedule going to work out? And suddenly you're forced to make all these schedule changes. And I'm wondering, are some of them actually beneficial, and they might actually help us make some adjustments in the future in other ways?
Yep, the teaming, as I said, is probably one that we will explore a little bit more and say, okay, do we want to continue with that? The other piece that's really come into focus, and a lot of the teachers have commented on, and Mr. O'Keefe and I also notice, is the desire of needing an avenue to teach some of these skills. Teachers have taken, because we've extended some of the class time in hybrid, that they've taken the time to teach some skills. It's like, okay, we could use a place to be able to be really systematic on skills for success for students. So that has also come to light.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Ellen,
No questions or comments.
Jeff,
Yeah, Greg, thanks for your report. I'm sure you're getting kind of getting this down, because we've been at it for a while. My question I had was, are we doing okay? And are you finding any things with truancy issues or follow-up at home? We all need to be accountable and deliver the best education we can and be as caring and compassionate as possible, but we also need to keep people accountable. And I'm wondering, if are you running into any of those situations? And I don't know what truancy laws, really are, but does that happen very often where you need to enforce those?
It's not too bad. It's probably in line with what it was when we were in person. The larger challenge is that I don't see the county being overly supportive, given the circumstances of being in a pandemic. So it's right. Where some families you could kind of use that as a carrot to maybe improve attendance. That's really kind of not an option. I'll give a shout out to Officer Weiss, who does he does visits and does social. He takes a social worker sometimes, or he'll take some other people with him just to do a safety check and make a wellness check on a student and checking with families. And he does a phenomenal job checking with those families, and that can be effective. but we don't have I don't think it's out of the norm what we normally have. It's just even more of a challenge to support those families and support the students to get them back engaged,
Right.
because we don't have all of our tools.
Yeah, and just a safety check makes a lot of sense if it need be, just to know what's going on in that home if you haven't heard anything
Right.
back. So appreciate
Exactly.
your time. Thank you.
Yep.
Noel, questions or comments? No, I think you are on mute.
Everything's on mute but my mouth.
Well, we can hear you. Always have the great lines.
Thoughtful. Thank you.
Well said. Okay, no, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you for your thoughtful and informative report. One thing you didn't touch on, and I would like to know what the direction is regarding substitute teachers and educational assistants. You said it's been a challenge. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel on that?
Well, it's actually the substitute teachers. I mean, the middle school, we have kind of a group of substitute teachers that they love coming to the middle school. So they're always looking for opportunities. We typically don't have a problem getting substitutes. In distance learning, we don't need them. So I'm hoping that our group when we get back in person, they will come back. We've used some technology when teachers are gone in hybrid. There's something called an owl camera, which I won't go into detail, but it literally is an owl that can show a classroom with 360 degrees. So a teacher, even if they're out, if they're well enough to teach, they can still teach from home with the students in the building. That's been effective. Our educational assistants, they've done a fabulous job. They've adjusted like everyone else. It was a challenge. I give, again, a shout out to our case managers in special education, because it's been difficult to figure out how to make sure we're servicing all of our students properly, but they've all done a terrific job. And now shifting to distance learning, there's different levels of comfort with technology, but they've all been right on board and meeting with students regularly. I know a few of them actually meet at the middle school still during distance learning for Wi-Fi issues to make sure they have good Wi-Fi. And so I see them all the time, meeting with students, helping with homework, sharing screens. Hey, I want to get this done. I'm going to meet with you in a couple hours, come back. So they're kind of the behind the scenes warriors that are doing some fabulous work in supporting our students.
Thank you.
Excellent questions, board members. Greg, thank you. And when you came before the board, I think it was September. It was August or September. You really highlighted the challenge of student engagement, and you've really gone after it. And just a number of ways that you've looked to really create, to really overcome the challenges of both the hybrid and the distance learning. And really just phenomenal work. And I think, the addition of the Promise Fellows, thanks, to the generosity of HCI, but a number of strategies that you're talking around teams and the outreach for student engagement and some of the things, I think it really points to Val's, thoughts about how we move forward in creating a budget and how we look at how we're reaching students in some of the ways that are effective. And one of the things when you talk about how quiet the middle school is, you have 140 students, middle school students, who are also doing portage.
Right.
So I think I looked at the numbers. You have, in a hybrid model, you have 400 students in that huge building. So it's a great environment, and it's one we wish we can't replicate, obviously. We'd love to be able to, but I think that you're spot on in terms of really identifying some ways that have worked so well. And I think the other thing I'd like to compliment you on, and your staff too, is really paying attention to the parent surveys to inform, your decision making. And most of all, it's been a testament of your leadership in terms of how you've been able to get staff and all of your staff on board and really addressing these tough challenges and making these tough decisions like the elective piece, but listening to parents and really making it all work. So thank you so very much. We know it's just been an incredible challenge and we are sincerely grateful for your work.
My pleasure. Thank you for the kind comments. Appreciate it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And all the best in the new year, right?
Exactly. No one's going to be sad to see 2020 go away.
Exactly. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to welcoming Erin Bailey, Director of Community Education, to provide an update. And certainly we're happy, always happy that Erin is at our board meetings, but particularly tonight, so we can thank her for her incredible results for the audit and for her phenomenal work with managing the community education budget. So thank you, Erin, and welcome.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here tonight. Just to give you an update on where we are in the work in our kind of how the year has started off and what's going well and kind of what we're still trying to solve. So things that were going well, our students and staff were certainly happy to start the school year in person. The way it worked for our building this year is we essentially potted everyone up prior to the start of the school year. And so had we needed to shift to a hybrid model, we were already in pods for our preschool. We had the ability to be, with being in the Northfield Community Education Center, certainly had the ability with more space, thus making it able to make that possible. I've had time to think this year if we were still at Longfellow School and how would we have done that, and I'm not sure that this would have been a doable, we would have had a doable of a solution other than to greatly reduce numbers. And so the building we are in has certainly made it possible to enroll students who are interested in attending. There are currently 122 students that are enrolled in hand-in-hand preschool. We started the year with 104 students attending in person, and then 18 students were attending in what we'll call our hand-in-hand Portage preschool. So we did mirror the K-12 district and offer a full distance learning preschool this year, and that did have 18 students. So that is the 18 students is the equivalent of one full section of preschool. So that was great for us to offer, and we certainly did see an interest in that. Just for your understanding, hand-in-hand preschool is full at 144 students, and we've been full for a number of years. So we have 122 students, and kind of like the rest of the district, did see families that made some choices to not send children this year just based to the pandemic. The same is true in Early Ventures. Again, a program we haven't necessarily had openings in very frequently, that we do have some openings in this year just because of choices families made. For students who are enrolled in hand-in-hand preschool, 34% of the students come from households who qualify for free or reduced price lunch meals, 26% are students of color, and 43% are special education students. Those students who are attending in person and choosing the Portage model, basically the demographics almost exactly mirror each other. So they're within about a percentage points if there's any adjustment. So very similar demographics from those who are attending in person and those who are attending via full-time distance learning. We then again had, because we'd had some experience with distance learning already this year, we did have a successful transition for hand-in-hand preschool into full distance learning. So we did do some modifications from what we learned in this last spring when we did this. So we pushed out, one thing we did hear from families last spring is less time on devices. And so with more time this year to plan for that, we do push out significantly more activity packets and projects that students can do at home that then they can share back. And we still, of course, have things that they can view online, but not necessarily as heavily using the device, which families were happy just due to the age of children and also the use of devices and internet capacity in their households when they have potentially K-12 students who are also trying to attend classes. So we certainly saw the dedication of students and staff as they're working under some, difficult circumstances with COVID-19 protocols. With Hand in Hand Preschool, we have classes that attend morning and afternoon, and they're different. So we are doing a significant amount of cleaning in the day as we transition different pods throughout the day. And so everyone has just reacted just with the most positive attitude to make sure that that happens. Family conferences were also a great way to start the school year. This was something we were looking to do in Hand in Hand actually before the pandemic made it more of a priority for everyone. And so it was certainly a great way for families, for us to connect with families, understand their needs better before the school year started, and just help to outline with them what this year would look like, no matter what learning model that we would encounter throughout the year. And then we're certainly, the building is open, which is a huge success for the year. And then we're moving forward with all the partnerships in the building. So just a couple updates on those partnerships. The Northfield Healthy Community Initiative has 4 staff working from the building. That started right away in September. The Community Action Center has had 5 food distributions from our parking lot. I will say one was taking place today. The line of cars, we started a second line in the bus pull-up lane because the line of cars was so far out on Lincoln Parkway that we did not want to cause any traffic issues. And so these food distributions have just been a great resource for families in the community and are well attended. We also tonight had a flu vaccinations clinic taking place at the same time. So we are really feeling fortunate to be able to use this building as to support the whole community too. And then the CAC is also currently storing food, some in their dry food in their food shelf area. They continue to use our freezers and refrigerators. And then they also moved in a brand new cooler for their space last Friday. So this is starting to continue to take shape. Additions, staff have reviewed and provided feedback on the first concept drawing provided by the Minnesota Children's Museum. I'm meeting with them again on Wednesday. So we continue to move forward with the design and installation for the Forma Media Center space. And then of course the Kaboom Playground has been installed and has gotten lots of use, which is very exciting. So the problems we are trying to solve for, prior to moving to full distance learning was just, of course, supporting students who are in quarantine. We did have times where we had 2 situations where a classroom was in quarantine for a certain amount of time, and then we've had students obviously that have been in quarantine. And so just when they are in quarantine, just making sure that they're getting their activity packets, still feel connected to teachers and to staff. But it does, of course, cause some logistical challenges and technology issues if they did not necessarily. We have 100% of students connected. We had to distribute about, I think, 7 devices out to students to make sure everyone was connected. HCI, of course, helped us with hotspots. But prior to being in full distance learning, we did not necessarily have those all distributed because they were attending in the building. And so being on quarantine sometimes caused a challenge. I will say also just for students, sometimes having access to food is a challenge. When we aren't necessarily having signed up for meals and things, some of those become a challenge too when students are in quarantine. Stress management for all staff. I mean, I think this has been mentioned probably in everybody's update, is just there is the amount of things to plan for and be prepared for and keep in the front of your mind is high this year. Another problem we're just working to solve for is just the lack of flow within the building. So I think what these programs typically look like are and are designed for is to have a pretty free flowing movement. So you can attend Early Ventures childcare, walk down the hallway and go to Hand in Hand Preschool and walk back to Early Ventures. And a parent doesn't need to be there to assist with your childcare and your preschool needs for the day. Those are things that COVID has put some pause on. So we typically would allow for an Early Ventures child to register for any section of Hand in Hand Preschool. And this year, in order to maintain those pods, we Early Ventures students could only sign up for one section of preschool. So it potentially meant that they weren't mixing with other students or necessarily getting the dosage of preschool that they may have wanted, but it allowed us then to maintain that pod of students from early ventures into hand-in-hand preschool and back without mixing. So that, and it only allowed us to do that for students who are the year before kindergarten, where typically if you were a 3-year-old, you would also be open to hand-in-hand preschool, but again, could not do that and ensure the pods. The same thing happens with our interventions. So we provide interventions in all of our program settings, typically. Again, this has been impacted as we just try to limit the number of staff interactions going in and out of certain classrooms where students are receiving their interventions. COVID has caused some limitations on that. And then of course, how we serve families with children ages birth to 3 years old. We do an extensive amount of home visits in a typical year, whether it's ECFE staff, whether it's our birth to 5 early child, birth to 5 and birth to 3 early childhood special education staff. Many of those things happen in their natural settings in their homes. This year, what that's looked like prior to going to full distance learning is we've done a lot of visits on the playground and in the gym, and in other areas of the building where other students and staff might not be accessing, but it has certainly changed the nature and the flow of these, how these programs operate, and it certainly increases the workload for staff. A lot of the observations that happen for kids in this age is during their play, and when you can't create that setting or have them be in that setting because of trying to avoid mixing of pods, it does certainly make it more difficult. And then of course, as Greg mentioned too, just finding substitute teachers and educational assistants has been challenging at certain times. There's just been a couple of situations where we've had a high level of staff out on certain days, which just means we are doing some shuffling within the building to make sure we have all the coverage that we need. And with that, there is our winter spring brochure that I hope all of you have received in your mailbox as of now, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Erin. Questions or comments board members have? Tom.
Thanks, Erin, for a good report. Couple questions. Do you know the timeline of the indoor play area?
So yeah, not fully. So we backed it up a little bit. So our original timeline had it being installed over winter break. And partly we bumped that back once we knew that the start of the school year was going to be different, and part of the move. We just didn't rush as much as we had on the schedule in kind of August and September. I will also own it feels a little cruel to kids to put in a nice indoor play space and say, you can't use that right now. So we are somewhat accommodating for that, Tom, just to, if we put it in, we want it to be used. And we are certainly putting it in with the idea of maintaining cleanliness. We don't think COVID is going to hopefully be as large of a factor in our lives going forward, but I think it's certainly shown a light on how to increase our level of disinfectant, sanitary, things like that. So that we've added some steps in there, even as we consider what's going forward, but we're trying to accommodate a schedule that feels fair to the children in the building somewhat too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, you got this new building, and I can imagine that initially you had different plans for it, and then those all had to change. So, and then hopefully next fall you'll have different plans than what's implemented now. So hopefully that'll all work out. And then just out of curiosity, you had a photograph, you had a picture of a young child with a mask. Were kids wearing masks? I mean, were they taking them off, playing with them? Or,
right. So per the governor's guidance, mask would not be required for anyone in our building. In our preschool setting and in our ECFE setting, I would say maybe 25% of children wore masks. All adults obviously wore masks, but I would say probably 25% of children in those. In our childcare setting, it's virtually none. I mean, it's some occasionally, but very low number. And again, they're there for anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a day, which is, I think, why you see the difference in that, where if you're coming to preschool or to ECFE, it's a much shorter amount of time.
And the kids had no problems wearing them? I mean, or was it, this is cool, or this is my
Yeah,
mask?
I would say the kids who were wearing them, I saw very little issues wearing. I mean, not even to the point of they were good about not touching them and keeping them on. For ECFE classes, we ran almost everything we could outdoors too. So we used that. If you've seen the outdoor playground that's on the front side of the building, that was our primary setting for ECFE classes this year too.
Great, thank you.
Amy.
Yes, thank you for the report, Erin. I had the great pleasure of seeing the new playground and was very impressed by it. And as I meet people with young children, I tell them they have to go check it out. So it's a beautiful playground. I'm sort of curious about the same thing Tom was asking about, which is how much social distancing can you do with children, and do you get the sense it's going to affect their mental health at all, and what they see as normal going forward? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So when we were in person, obviously social distancing, the same guidelines that the high school or the middle school would have had in hybrid art looked, we were in an in-person setting. Part of what we did, Amy, at the start of the year though, was to help to promote that. And so when we looked at our numbers at the start of the year and looked at the space that we had in this new building, we were able to spread everybody out considerably. So the number of what we would have normally had in a one classroom, the 2 teachers and the 18 kids, most classes right now, as you saw, have probably 12 kids about in them, and they're spread over 2 classrooms. So we took 2 classrooms, opened up the divider, but we're asking them to stay on their own side, but the teachers can see across the room, they can interact with students, but the kids basically are in smaller pods. And we did that very intentionally because we had the ability to do so, and it allowed us to keep kids safer. So you're right. Social distancing is a more of a challenge in the 5 and under population. So we took other steps to reduce how many students and staff were ever in one classroom setting at a time. Does that make sense?
Right. And do you think there'll be any long-term effects from this age group, or are they resilient enough that they'll just bounce back when the opportunity arises?
I like to believe, Amy, that all kids are resilient, and that we are also trying to teach the skills right now that yes, it looks different, but that we are also still teaching both this social emotion. We are heavy on social emotional learning. We use second step in our program too. We've used a lot of social stories that are related to a pandemic, and so being able to address this with kids, and I mean, kids know it's not, especially if they've been in programs before, it's not the same, but we are certainly trying hard to make those things happen in the safest way that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Rob.
Thanks, Erin. I have no questions or additional comments.
Ellen.
Sure, I had one question. So I think I'd understood way back when the world was different, that when you came into this building, that this year was going to be a sort of, let's just do the same thing until we get used to the building. And then of course that didn't actually get to happen the way you had wanted. Do you, as you look to the future of when things are back to a different normal, are you going to still sort of think that you'd like to be in the building and be able to experience that normal before you sort of undertake making any significant changes?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ellen. I don't know if I can totally answer it quite. I mean, I think we would still, when more of life gets back to normal, I envision that the need for full-time preschool, full day preschool still exists. And I anticipate the need for more childcare slots in this community still exists. They don't exist in the same way right now. I think as life slowly gets back normal, though I'm not sure that those have necessarily gone away. They might take a dip for a certain amount of time. I think you are right, our plan for this year was to kind of do business as normal because we were moving in at the end of August and needing to have some kind of be able to move in and launch the year about a week later. So I think we need a little bit, have to know a little bit more, what does next fall look like, probably before we start some of this. We know we've seen a reduction right now in how many people are participating in our program. And does the world look enough different that people will come back at a higher rate is probably something we need a little bit more information on before we can fully determine, would we start to implement some of those growth plans next year, or would we be looking at slightly longer?
Thanks.
Great question, Ellen. Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It sounds like you're calling some audibles at the line of scrimmage and putting the game plan in day by day. So I appreciate your diligence of working hard on all of that, and get through this year, and hopefully some next year will be a little bit more normal.
Noel?
I'll hope for that, Jeff.
Thank you for your report. It's good to hear your enthusiasm for the reallocation of the building. And we look forward to this year, but also next year when you can be a little bit more in control. Thank you for your report.
Thanks, Noel.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. I mean, you just do a phenomenal job, and we are so grateful for your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Dr. Hillman, COVID-19 response and operations update.
Yes, I will keep my report as brief as possible this evening to allow board members to ask questions. You have heard from our administrators about the transition to distance learning. Both Aaron and Greg talked about their experience this evening. Talking with all of our leaders, I would characterize our shift to distance learning this time around as a much smoother process than we had in the spring. We can't forget that in the spring, we had an emergency move to distance learning based upon the concerns about the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, this time around, with people having some experience, both families and staff members, we have across the board heard a lot of a much more smooth start to distance learning this time around versus what we had last spring. One of the key things that our administrative team recognizes is that when we move to distance learning, being able to manage our staff remotely has to be done differently. And even though we are able to have staff work from the building this time around, as opposed to last spring when there was the stay-at-home order, we still know that managing a remote workforce in a different way than if everybody is here is something that as leaders we need to make sure that we concentrate on. So I'm proud to tell you that as of Wednesday, December 9th, our administrative team had 422 check-ins with our staff, and that was either via email, telephone, text messaging, video conferencing, or even a potentially socially distanced a personal meeting in the building. So what I want the board to know is that when we shifted to distance learning in the spring, we were all learning about a lot of different things. As we've shifted this fall, people have a little bit more experience, and we are leveraging what we learned last spring, including as leadership, making sure that we are routinely checking with our staff intentionally to make sure that they have what they need, that they have the support that they need in order to implement this as effectively as possible. And even though we've had experience before, we are still all learning how to effectively teach from a full remote perspective. So I'm very proud of the fact that people have adopted a continuous improvement mindset. They looked at what they learned last spring. How do we make changes? And you heard that this evening in both reports from Greg and from Aaron. I also want to talk through a little bit about the providing at-risk assistance to at-risk learners. And in the narrative that I included in your packet, I shared with you the work of Cheryl Hall and Hope Langston, that they put together some protocols for bringing in our most at-risk students. And when we think our most at-risk students, we think about our area learning center students. We think about our special education students who have very intense needs. We also think about our EL students who may need some additional support in their language development that is very difficult to do via video conference. And we also think about some of those other at-risk learners. So we have put together a staged return plan for at-risk students. We started off right away with our area learning center following an approach that we learned from Rochester Public Schools with an appointment-based system. So if there's an area learning center student who needed some specific assistance with their distance learning, they can contact the office. There was a schedule where they can request to come in for a certain period of time, as long as the teacher is there. They can, of course, get assistance via Zoom as well, but our Area Learning Center knew that that consistent connection for a variety of reasons was really important. We have been able to do that successfully, and I want to point out that the Area Learning Center is the only building in the district that has had 0 confirmed COVID-19 cases. So their protocols and the way that they're working through this was our beginning effort to see how could we support at-risk learners in person, even when most of our students are learning remotely. The second group of students who we will actually be bringing in later this week are highly intense need special education students. So these are students who spend quite a bit of time, 60% or more of their daily minutes in special education. These are setting 3 special education students. We had originally looked at where we were at when we started distance learning. We all know that our county case rate, the number of infections per 10,000 residents, was well above 200. And so as we looked at what we looked at through the reasonable person theory, we thought if we could get back down under 125 cases per 10,000, that would be a reasonable time to start bringing in very targeted special education services. Last week, we dropped below 125. So this week we are able to start bringing in some special education students with highly intense needs. That will happen later this week and then next week, and then continue after the new year. So we are working through that. We have three different pieces that we use with that. Who are the students? What are the case rates? And then are our staff able and willing to be able to come in? And in these cases, we've been able to check all 3 boxes. We would not start any EL or other at-risk learner students services until after the beginning of the new year. I'm going to get to the metrics in just a moment. So I want to also share that one of the things that we had learned in the Pulse survey is families really not feeling that they always had all of the resources to support student learning at home. So we've done a variety of pieces, including adding specific parental resources as part of our weekly updates. And then we started 4 weeks ago, we started with a parent support webinar that we are running on Sunday evenings from 6:30 to 7. Before this last one on this past Sunday night, we had been averaging 47 connected devices for each of those first 3 sessions. We know there could be multiple people listening to that, but we can get a report. And so we're averaging 47 connected devices through those first 3 sessions. The first week we had Hope Langston and I talked about the transition to distance learning and what kind of supports and tools were available for families. The second week we worked with local health and wellness coach, Cindy Boyam, to talk with families about how they can set up their home and their relationships at home for success during distance learning, and really honoring and understanding that we're in a very challenging time and that there are some tools needed to be able to address some of those challenges within our homes. The third week, we were welcomed Dr. Jane Ronsheimer, a local physician at Alina Health Clinic, and Rice County Clinical Community Supervisor Sarah Coulter to be able to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of public health and the kinds of things that people needed to be able to do to keep fighting the pandemic and keep impacting those county infection rates. And then just this past weekend, we had a great all-star panel. Allison Sweeney, a 3rd grade teacher at Sibley Elementary, Rose Turnicliffe, a 6th grade teacher and previous intervention teacher at the middle school, Hope Langston, and myself. We talked about how parents can support reading development in the home. We know that that's such an important piece. And when we have students off campus, wanting to make sure that that reading development continues and that we look at parents as learning partners. We need a stronger partnership more than ever. People are starting to think about, okay, we know that distance learning was scheduled to go through the end of winter break. What's going to happen after the beginning of the new year? And what we're looking at right now is the metrics that we have from the Department of Health and the Department of Education. The data that we are using now has shrunk. When we were in person or in the hybrid model, there were a number of other data points that we were able to use because we had students on campus. We had people reporting to us their COVID-19 infections, their COVID-19 close contacts, and in distance learning, self-reporting just is not working like it did when we had people coming to campus. So we're really back to using 3 different metrics at this point based upon what we have from the Department of Health and the Department of Education. We have to move back to using the county infection rate per 10,000 residents and those guidelines that Governor Walz's team set out on July 31st for us. So we are reverting back at this point to looking at that data. We are also looking to make sure that the schools have the ability to implement the safety measures that are required for either hybrid or in-person learning. And I think we've seen this fall that we were able to mitigate danger here at school of the transmission of the virus. And then finally, do we have enough healthy employees to be able to effectively staff school programs? And we know that for many school districts, that was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back to be able to have to move to distance learning. It wasn't just about the rise in cases. It was also about that we had so many staff who needed to quarantine or who were out that we weren't able to effectively staff buildings in a way that we felt supported programming and was able to do that safely. So we're back to looking at that. We had really hoped to be able to share with families what our plan was for after winter break. We had hoped to be able to do that last week. Unfortunately, there were two pieces that came to our attention that we felt it was reasonable to delay that decision. Number one is that we expect Governor Walz is going to speak this week. We thought he was going to speak today. Now we understand that he will speak Wednesday to talk about the current pause and if there will be any extension in that, and if there will be other resources or other things that come forward in that talk that we're looking forward to on Wednesday. In addition, we've been hearing some pieces that there is a group of 28 professionals, including 9 superintendents, representatives from teachers organizations, Department of Health, Department of Ed, who have been meeting to talk about learning model transitions. And some of the things that we've been hearing coming out of that group is that there is the possibility of some updated guidance from the Department of Health that may really change the guidelines that we started to get about the county infection rates back in July. Of course, some of you may have seen over the weekend, there was an article, actually it was in today's paper, saying that the Department of Education is saying, no, we're going to really stick with the original guidelines. And so we are waiting just to hear if we can hear something this week. We'd love to be able to use that to inform our decision-making for how we come back after winter break. What I did share with families at the end of last week in my weekly update is that they do need to plan for at least a short period of distance learning after winter break. And again, we are going to do our best to be able to give the decisions about how we are going to come back after winter break and what would the potential return to school and in either an in-person or a hybrid model look like. Last week's county number was down to 117. And based upon the data that we're seeing this week, we anticipate that that will keep going down. Now, we know in October and November that data skyrocketed nearly straight up when you looked at the graph. It is decreasing, not quite as fast as it went up, but at a fairly rapid rate. Now, I think the key thing there is that people may become thinking that we are on the right track and now we don't have to do all those things that were really helpful in us getting that number to come down. And what I would just tell people is we have to triple down on all of the hard work that we've been doing around social distancing and masking and those difficult things of avoiding gatherings outside of our homes with people who aren't in our household unit. All of those kinds of things we need to keep going because we know that this virus can go back up as quickly as it has gone up and come down. We of course know that the vaccine is on its way, and we hope as we start to see people who become vaccinated that we continue to be able to have a greater control over the virus. I also want to share with you that we have been a pilot for the Department of Health in a COVID-19 school-based pilot for testing. And we've done 2 of these sessions now, and we'll have a third one this Wednesday at Northfield Middle School from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. We're using the saliva test, so it's not an invasive test at all. The first weekend, December 2nd, we had 480 tests, and they were gone in 4 hours. We thought we would be open for 6 hours, but we gave the last test out a little bit after 5 p.m. We did get results from 450 of those tests. There were a total of 5 positive results, about a 1.1% positivity rate. And while you might think, oh, you only got 5 people, why was it even worth it? If you think we were targeting people who are asymptomatic, people without symptoms, and if you think about making sure that we get those 5 people out of circulation and isolating, you think about the impact that 5 asymptomatic people can have on spreading the virus. Getting even just 5 people out of the mix is a really important piece in terms of us moving forward and getting control over the virus again. This past week, we had 511 tests administered. We had 720 total tests, and I believe we're gonna have around 600 tests this week. And then we'll be learning what can we do with what we have learned from these tests. And we're really working on how can that be part of our return to school metrics as we move forward. I will tell you, we've had really positive feedback from the Department of Health, so much so that they brought someone from another region this past week to watch the logistics of how we ran the site. You really weren't waiting very long. Even the second week when we had a lot more people show up to begin with, the wait was fairly reasonable compared to what you would think at other sites. So we are very proud of being part of this testing process, and we're very grateful to MDH for including us in that piece. I do want to also share just a little bit more about our anti-racism and racial equity work. Despite all of the urgency of the pandemic, we have not lost sight of the importance of carrying this work forward. Since my last report, I've given you a list of items that we continue to work on in your packet. And the one piece I'm going to focus on is that we are starting to turn over our monthly PLC racial equity discussions to teacher leaders. And this week, Northfield High School English teacher Sean Dubé and the district's licensed school nurse Maimuna Turakita are going to present a session about we call it Speak Up at School. And it's a series of resources from a magazine called Teaching Tolerance, really giving people some simulated opportunities to think about circumstances and how they might respond, and giving them some sentence starters and some tools that they can use to respond if they hear students or staff or people in the community using racist language or telling jokes that are insensitive about racial equity and those kinds of things. And so we're working forward to try to continue to develop the skill set within our staff through our monthly PLC racial equity discussions. And I've listed a number of other things that we are working on right now in that under that framework of attacking symbolism, individual behavior, and systemic behavior, and making sure that we truly live out our vision of preparing every student for lifelong success in a world-class learning environment. And we believe unequivocally that a world-class learning environment is anti-racist. I do want to go off of one thing that Dr. Hardy had mentioned, is that, as you know, we did have extensive discussion last winter about the potential of a later school start time. And I had promised you last spring that I would bring this discussion back this fall. I think you all understand why that discussion has had to go by the wayside for this at this moment. But I do think that it's important that we will bring that discussion back in the winter. We have learned a lot about the potential benefits of additional sleep for especially our high school students as we have evaluated the schedules that we've used in distance learning. And so that's another piece, even though you think, well, how is that connected? When our classes start later because of distance learning, when that happened in the spring and some of the ways that that's happening now, we are getting some additional data and thinking about, are there different schedules that could better support our secondary learners? So I had told you that we would try to do that this fall. I think you understand why we have not gotten there, but I want to make sure that you know that it is not completely off of our radar. And so those are the items that I have for you today.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, board members, questions or comments for Dr. Hillman? Tom?
Thanks, Matt. No questions or comments.
Amy?
Thanks. No questions or comments.
Rob?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Ellen?
No questions or comments.
Jeff?
Thanks, Matt. No questions or comments.
Noel?
Dr. Hillman, thank you. Informative as usual.
Okay, great. Well, Dr. Hillman, we just are so incredibly grateful for the work you're doing. I mean, it's just outstanding in so many ways. And I think top of that list should be your communication to parents and staff and ultimately to the students. It's just been phenomenal. And you are working tirelessly to just try to keep a pulse on everything that's happening. And quite honestly, we all marvel at the job that you are doing under an incredible amount of stress. So just a testament to you that you jumped on the testing program as soon as you felt like that was available. And that has just been huge. I want to compliment you on the incredibly smart and dedicated command team that you put together. We have some representatives from staff and students and the community, and they have just been working hard in terms of trying to make the right decisions about the learning models and the things going forward. But it's just a testament to your leadership, and you have really people have rallied, and they're tired and they're stressed, and you keep them moving forward every day. And that's just because they see you doing that and the positive outlook you have that we can do this and we can continue to move forward. And I think in addition to that, the priority you've placed on mental health for our students and for our families and the staff has just been incredible. And you've just figured out how to reach people in so many different ways. And we talk about lessons learned. And I think that as a school district, we're clearly going to come out of this much stronger as a district and a community. So we really can't thank you enough. And we hope that maybe in the coming holiday that you'll have some opportunity to kind of decompress a little bit, but we know it's been full court press for months and weeks and days on end. And so we just are so grateful for your work.
It's my distinct privilege. Thank you. And we have a great team of people who are doing all of those things that you just said. So it's my privilege to serve them and you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that board members does conclude our items for discussion and report. So we can move on now to approval of the consent grouping. There were a few items in the personnel items in the table file that were added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay, not hearing anyone. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ellen, and it is seconded by Jeff. We will ask, Anita will conduct with a motion and a second. Anita will conduct a roll call vote. Anita?
Roniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent, motion carries. We'll move on now to items for individual action. We have 5 items this evening. First item is our fiscal year 2020 audit. Is there a motion to approve the 2019-20 audit as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Amy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. Any questions or comments by board members? I will run through the roll call quickly, and if you have no question or comment, you can simply pass. Tom?
Pass.
Amy?
Pass.
Rob?
Pass.
Ellen?
Pass.
Jeff?
Pass.
Noel?
Pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. No questions or comments. Anita, roll call vote, please.
Roniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Okay, excellent. The motion to approve the 2019-20 audit carries. Our next item is policy committee recommendations. We'll ask for a motion and then have time for question and comments. So the board is, is there a motion to approve policies 404, 409, 413, and 415 as presented?
I'd move it, Noel.
Moved by Noel. Is there a second?
Second by Tom.
Second by Tom. Thank you. So as you recall, we did have the first reading for all of these policies at our November 23rd board meeting. So, but I will ask board members for any questions or comments on these policies. Tom?
Pass.
Amy?
Pass.
Rob?
Pass.
Ellen?
Pass.
Jeff?
Pass.
Noel?
Pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the approval of the policies. Anita, a roll call vote, please.
Roniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent. Motion carries. Those policies are approved. Our next item is the Northfield High School Raider mascot refresh. Is there a motion to direct Northfield High School administration to complete a process that offers the board up to 4 options for refreshing the Raider team mascot? Conceptual designs centered on the community's defeat of the James Younger Gang will be given the strongest consideration, but other designs are welcome. The designs must be free from weaponry and simple to reproduce. Unless there are unavoidable delays, the board will review the submitted options no later than March 1st, 2021. That is the motion. Is there a
Motion.
motion to approve?
Motion.
Moved by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second by Tom.
Second by Tom. I will open it up for questions or comments by board members. Tom?
No, time to do it. Thanks.
Excellent. Amy?
I am still hoping that the new mascot will be gender-free somehow. I don't know if we can include that, but I'm just throwing that out to the universe. Maybe someone will hear that.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Rob?
No questions or comments?
Ellen?
No questions or comments.
Jeff?
No questions or comments.
Noel?
I had a question from a voter a couple of days ago asking the need for a mascot. And I'd like to hear comments from the other board members if they've had time to, if they need a little time to think about it. Maybe we shouldn't discuss it now, but what is the value of a mascot is what this person was asking me.
That's an interesting comment. Did you have a response for them, Noel?
I said I'd bring it to the board.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's certainly one of those traditions that seem to be held dear by most high school and professional teams, is to have a mascot, and that I think goes to the larger context of identifying your school but I think it's an interesting point.
And Julie, I think that's something that the board would be able to consider through that process, right? I mean, at the end of the process, there will be things that are submitted. And I think at that time, if there are things that the board would choose to say, well, we're not going to have them, that's an option that the board could also select.
Can I have a comment for you. Number one, about Northfield. I talked to a guy from Massachusetts the other day, and he knew Northfield because Northfield is most famous for the Raider Raid, period. And the fact of the matter is, we're not celebrating Raiders. We're celebrating the defeat of Jesse James days. It's defeat. We're victorious over the criminals that came to rob our town. So that is our number one identity for Northfield, Minnesota.
Thank you, Jeff. Do our board members, if anyone else have a question or a comment that in reaction to Noel's question?
I would want to respond to Jeff's comment. In that case, Northfield should be the Northfield Defenders rather than Northfield Raiders. Because what we did was defend, not raid.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, Anita, please.
Rania,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, our fourth item for individual action is there a motion to certify the county auditors the 2020 payable 2021 final certified levy limitation and certification report in the amount of $20,313,043.39.
So moved.
Moved by Amy. Is there a second?
Second by Tom.
Second by Tom. I will run through roll call for any questions or comments. Tom?
Pass.
Amy?
Pass.
Rob?
Pass.
Ellen?
Pass.
Jeff?
Pass.
Noel?
Pass.
And myself. I did the roll call vote, Anita. I apologize for that. I guess the time is getting late, but Oh no, I'm sorry, I was thinking do a roll call vote. Okay, I'm really losing it. Sorry, people. Okay, we were just asking for questions or comments. I am so sorry. Okay, we have no questions or comments. Now we can do the roll call vote. Anita, thank you.
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So we have one more item for individual action. Let's see if I can get this one right. So is there a motion to approve the revised 2020-2021 general fund budget of revenues of $58,184,370 and expenditures of $60,073,958? Is
So
there a
moved.
motion? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. Okay, I will run through questions or comments prior to the roll call vote. Tom,
Pass.
Amy,
Pass.
Rob,
Pass.
Ellen,
Pass.
Jeff,
Pass.
Noel.
Pass.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. I will like to entertain one additional motion. Oh, did
Wait,
we do?
we just did the passing on
Oh,
comments.
I'm sorry. Now I'm really losing it. I am so sorry. Anita, roll call vote, please. Thank you, Ellen.
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Okay, I had one last chance and I blew it. So now I would like to entertain a motion. However, we are presently at 9:50 and we do have a few items of business remaining on the agenda. So I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting past 10 p.m.
I'd
So
move.
moved.
Moved by Amy. Is there a
I'll second.
second?
Second.
Okay, it is a motion and a second by Noel. Anita, if we could have a roll call vote on the motion to extend the meeting past 10 p.m.
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to items for information enrollment report. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, in your packet this evening, you had the monthly enrollment report, and you'll notice that we've leveled off just a little bit more. We had gone from 3883 full-time only students, excluding early childhood and part-time or independent study ALC students. On October 1, our number was 3883. In November, that had bumped up a little bit to 3890, and we're now back down to 3880. So you are seeing those numbers each month, and that is the enrollment report for December.
Excellent. Thank you. I will run through board members if you have any questions or comments on the enrollment report. Tom,
Pass.
Amy,
Pass.
Rob,
Pass.
Ellen,
Pass.
Jeff,
Pass.
Noel.
Pass.
Okay, excellent. So we'll move on to our second item for information, which is construction update. We are at number 38. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, it's amazing that we are at number 38. And what you'll see is that we are getting very close. I was at Greenville Park today. There were some modifications and some punch list items getting taken care of at that facility today. And then the big thing is that the carpet is here for the administrative office update, and that will start to be installed this week. We've been through the district offices a number of times. They're looking in great shape. So, just an excellent remodel that is going to benefit the community for decades and decades. In addition to being a financial wizard, Val Murdesdorf is also an excellent moving coordinator. She has been in charge of putting together the plan for the district offices to move. We are currently in boxes, and we are all having to have all of those things ready by Friday. District office team will be working from home for next week as the items are moved. And then after the holiday, we'll be unpacking, and the district office will be closed for a short period of time. We'll be updating the website with that as well. and then officially reopening on January 4th. So we are excited to be able to move into this new space and then allow the high school to be working on how they will take advantage of that space. Of course, the plans for dealing with that were delayed by COVID, but they are going to be able to make good use of that space as we move ahead. So I'm just going to ask if Val has anything else to add about the district office move.
No, I don't.
So thanks for your work on that too, Val.
My pleasure.
Excellent, thank you. It's crazy to think we're down to the last project, and but I appreciate. I know it's a heavy lift for everyone in the district office who are already juggling a number of challenges to have to physically look at their office space and box it up, and so you know it's will be good when it happens, but it's tough right now for having that additional to do on your end. So thank you. Okay, so construction update. I will go through board members if they have any questions regarding any of the construction projects. Tom.
Yes.
Amy.
I'm just wondering about the high school district office renovation. How is there money set aside for that, and when will they be able to start using it? I know you said it was deferred for a little while, but if you could just tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, right now we don't have any dollars set aside this year for that process. We are meeting with our capital projects committee in the next week, and I anticipate that that will be part of our discussion. The high school has the high school administration has a number of ideas about how to use that space. I think they're really specifically looking at how could they use that space to support students with individual needs and to be able to parlay that into freeing up larger classrooms in the building. So we will be considering any potential changes there. It'll be minimal renovation. We're certainly not talking about a major renovation. Would be most likely things that we would do in-house. But I know that the high school administration has some concepts that they're working toward. They could potentially be using that space fairly quickly without modifications, depending on how they choose to use that space. And then, of course, we would be using the summertime to make any physical modifications to that facility that would be necessary.
Thank you.
Rob.
Pass.
Ellen.
Pass.
Jeff.
Pass.
Noel.
Pass.
Okay, thank you for those items for information update. Move on to future meetings. We're looking into the new year. Monday, January 11th, 2021, 7 p.m., the organizational board meeting, followed by the regular board meeting, and Monday, January 25th at 7 p.m., regular board meeting. The format of that meeting, of course, is in flux, but at some point we are hoping to be in our new boardroom at the new Northfield district offices. So with that, I have one last thing that we need to do tonight, and that is, of course, celebrate our two departing board members, Ellen Iverson and Rob Hardy. And this is tough. This is really tough. Wow. You two are absolutely amazing. So I have some remarks that I'd like to share. As we know, both Ellen and Rob chose not to pursue another term on the board. Ellen was first elected to the board in 2008. She came to the board as a parent of two Northfield Public School students. As both a parent volunteer at Greenville Park Elementary and as a community member on the district's Educational Program Advisory Council, Ellen from the onset understood the challenges and opportunities facing the district. Time and again, the board benefited immensely from her expertise as a director of evaluation at the Science Education Resource Center at Carleton College. This knowledge and unique understanding of how to evaluate programs aimed at improving teaching and learning was invaluable to the board as we reviewed curriculum and staff development programs. As a member of the Northfield Promises Data Action Team, Ellen's vast knowledge aids them in making critical program decisions. This vital work has led to student achievement gains that our district could not achieve alone. Ellen was fiercely dedicated to her board work. She willingly stepped forward to volunteer as a school board liaison on a number of district committees. Her work with the District Youth Council helped them to understand how to harness their energy and enthusiasm to effectively provide the student voice to the board's decision-making process. Ellen served as board chair from 2013 to 2015. Her strength of leadership helped the board to navigate the decision-making process on two important initiatives that would have long-term impacts for the district, including the District Master Facilities Plan and the Transformational Technology iPad Initiative. As a board, we have profound respect for her work. She was quick to acknowledge the hard work of our administrators and staff for the great work they do for students. Ellen's approach to decision-making was first and foremost what was in the best interest of students. Her board service will be marked with great passion, dedication, and commitment to Northfield students and their families. Thank you, Ellen, for your 12 years of service to the board. You will be so dearly missed. So, Rob, I will give the board opportunity to make some remarks to you as well. Rob was first elected to the board in 2012. He came to the board with an intense interest in education and educational issues. He served as a community member on the district's Educational Program Advisory Council. Rob is one of the founders and former board chair of the Canyon River STEM School and a K-8 charter school. Rob's work on the board reflected his intense passion and concern for the well-being of Northfield students and their families. He's an ardent supporter of the district's Torch program. His work on the Torch Advisory Committee was instrumental in the program's successful growth. What we valued most about Rob was the approach he used in making decisions. He was committed to having a thorough understanding of all aspects of the issues at hand. He devoted a great deal of time to conduct comprehensive research in order to ask all the right questions. He placed a high priority on understanding how the board's decisions would impact individual students and staff members. One of his greatest strengths is to view board issues through an equity lens. Rob served the district well as a member of the Policy Review Committee. His ability to critique the technical aspects of policy language and his skill in drafting new policies was invaluable to the committee's work. Rob is respected by the board for his civic mindedness and community involvement. In 2015, the Northfield Public Library and the Arts and Culture Committee selected him as the community's first poet laureate. Rob has enthusiastically embraced his post and has worked tirelessly to achieve his goal of giving voice to new and different poetic voices in our community. We are grateful for the beautiful piece he wrote to celebrate the class of 2020. His poem served as a powerful opening to their virtual graduation ceremony. Thank you, Rob, for your 8 years of service to the board. You will be best remembered for a champion of Northfield students and your unwavering care and concern for their well-being. You will also be greatly missed. So as a board, we just cannot thank the two of you enough. And I hope you understand how deeply difficult it is for us to have to say goodbye. But we, of course, wish you all the best. So if we can all unmute and provide a moment of great applause for these two amazing board members. Excellent. So what I would like to do is just run through board members so that they have an opportunity to personally say goodbye. Tom?
Yeah, thanks. So I've had the pleasure and honor of serving with Ellen and Rob for only 2 years. They're both deep thinkers and sincerely care about the education of all kids, about the equity and humanity of us all as fellow humans, and about the school district and its responsibility to the students, staff, and community. Their wise, sometimes poetic stewardship and oversight has helped make the Northfield schools the exceptional school district that it is. Big impacts happen in small venues at the local level. Public service is rewarding because it benefits countless others. I thank Ellen for her 12 years and Rob for his 8 years on the board. Nelson Mandela said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." Thank you for your service and sacrifice. Best wishes for your future.
Thank you, Tom. Wonderful remarks. Amy.
Well, first, I want to thank Rob for being an excellent table mate for 3.5 years until COVID separated us. And I also just wanted to say to both of you that you have made, you definitely have both left your mark on the Northfield schools, and you've had such a positive impact on the Northfield community. And I wanted to thank you for that and wish you both well as you move through the next doors of your life and the next adventures. And I know you're going to do great things. So thank you for being part of my life for the last 4 years. And I look forward to watching you as you move forward.
Thank you, Amy. Jeff.
Yeah, I say great job there on talking about Ellen and Rob. I just enjoyed my time with you guys. Just appreciate your friendship and your wonderful critical thinking skills. And I think that you bring a lot to the table, and you always make decisions that are, well thought out. You spent a lot of time with that, and your dedication and your contributions to the district are just greatly appreciated. So you're very much appreciated, and I take my hats off to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Noel.
I got to make sure I'm unmuted here. When some members join the board, they usually look to the other board members for a role in leadership guidance. This was a situation where we had 2 board members come on, and I think they provided leadership almost immediately, and particularly with their way that they were thoughtful and articulate in responding to the issues. So congratulations for your service. Thank you for your service, and congratulations to what is in store for you for next.
Thank you, Noel. Excellent. Dr. Hillman, did you have any comments?
I have made comments to both Dr. Iverson and Dr. Hardy over the last couple of weeks, but I never miss an opportunity to say something, but I will be brief, though Rob's laughing because he doesn't believe that's possible. But I've known both of these, extraordinary human beings for 11 years, and both of them mean a lot to me, both professionally and personally. And the first thing I want to thank them for is being part of the team that hired me for the superintendent's job. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for the support and the guidance that you gave me in my development as a leader in the school district. And that's something I will never forget. And you're not getting away with it just because you're getting off the board. I'm still going to be coming to you as a community representatives. I also want to just highlight again the student-centeredness that you have brought to the board. That was always the lens in which you looked through things, and the way that you understand governance and what the school board's role is in an effective educational organization is a model for what other people should learn. You should teach the class on understanding how governance, what role board members have in the governance of the district. And for that, I am truly grateful, because I think that as a governance board, we value that people who really embrace that approach. Again, going back to the fact that we're going to update a strategic plan here most likely in the next year. And the 2 of you were instrumental in helping to develop the strategic plan that has gotten the wins that we've had over the last several years. If you think about the change in the reading curriculum that we had, if you think about the implementation of social emotional learning, you think about the financial methods that we have that have kept us cut free for over a decade, I think all of those things came directly from you. So I am very grateful for you. I've told you that already. I'll be telling you more. You are not replaceable, right? There will be new people in these seats in January, but no one will be able to replace what you have brought to this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Well said, everyone. We hope, Ellen and Rob, you depart knowing how well respected you were and how we valued your work and how dearly you will be missed. Okay, so with that, have a restful and safe holiday season for everyone, and we'll see everyone in the new year. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Moved by Noel. Is there a second?
Second by-
We will second by Ellen. We will ask for a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Anita?
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
I.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Hey.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.